Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. False Eunuch. With many children, I'm as happy as a fish in water. Chapter 41. I am guilty, please punish me. The ministers all knelt down in front of Li Jiao, their heads already touching the ground. However, the crown and beaded curtain worn by the emperor fluctuated violently, showing that its owner was not in a peaceful state of mind. Under Li Jiao's calm face, hidden was a huge wave of anger. These ministers in front of them are not asking for forgiveness. Instead, they are more like forcing the emperor to grant him a palace. They are confident. Zhao Shengshu, you said that there are currently hundreds of thousands of troops in the capital, but there are no 10,000 people to fight the rebellion. When asked by Li Jiao, Zhao Kuang admitted his mistake without saying a word. Your Majesty, I apologize for causing the corruption of the capital camp. However, before Li Jiao could say anything, ministers rushed to find compensation for Zhao Kuangyan. Your Majesty, the reason why the capital camp is what it is today is definitely not the fault of Zhao Shengshu, but the fault of those martial nobles with their corpses lying bare of food. The person who said this was the Minister of War. There are 4 guards of Zuying in front of us. The number of soldiers originally planned to be 60,000, but a thorough investigation found that there are less than 30,000, and most of the remaining soldiers are old, weak, sick and disabled. The 5 guards of the right camp were also newly built by Mr. Zhao the year before last. The soldiers are poorly trained and the armor is insufficient. As for the 3 guards in the middle camp, they have always been the basic base of the martial nobles, and they are nominally the emperor's personal army. But in fact, many Wuxun families in the capital are quite close to the Zhao Kuangyan brothers and have a close relationship. Hearing this, Li Jiao looked at Wu Xuan's row, the burly generals in front. Niu Jizong, who felt the emperor's gaze, had a thin layer of cold sweat on his forehead. He is one of the 8 dukes of the late emperor's martial arts and the legitimate son of the Niu family. He is now the first-class uncle of Shiwei and is in charge of the 3 guards of the central camp. These 3 guards have a real salary of 30,000, and are nominally the most capable in the Beijing camp. But Niu Jizong is very aware of the current situation of the 3 guards in Zongying. All I can say is, it's a complete mess. Although the shortage is not as shocking as that of Zuying, there are only 20,000 poorly trained soldiers. Let him, a noble man of martial arts, lead these soldiers who have less than a month's training to suppress those madmen of the White Lotus sect. Isn't this just asking him to die? However, facing the emperor's gaze, Niu Jizong knocked his head to the ground with a clang. Your Majesty, I apologize. Niu Jizong, who was almost on his knees, immediately explained that the current situation of the Zongying camp was unbearable. He is a descendant of the 8 princes specially gifted by the late emperor, and he has retired with the country. This crime was not enough for the new emperor who had just ascended the throne to test his sword. This is also true. Li Jiao was so angry that he felt evil, but he didn't say anything. If the middle camp led by Wu Xuan is removed, will it be possible for Zhao Kuangyan to take control? Zhao Qing, it seems that you are the only one who can lead the right battalion to quell the rebellion against the White Lotus sect. Li Jiao tried to make his voice sound pleasant. But the next moment, someone stopped him. Your Majesty, no. Now the number of combatable troops in the capital is no more than the 5 guards of the right camp. If they are transferred out of the capital, the White Lotus sect's thieves will have an opportunity to take advantage of them. Yes, this right camp must not leave the city. After hearing this, some ministers who were not from Zhao Kuangyan's faction quickly helped to speak. If the White Lotus sect is really allowed to invade the capital, they will be the unlucky ones. Li Jiao's face was expressionless. It was hard for him to imagine that less than 40 years after the founding of Li Tang, the ministers in the court had already become a bunch of insects. Li Jiao took a deep breath and asked Zhao Kuangyan how to put down the rebellion. After all, this matter was originally his responsibility as Minister of War. Right now, the Beijing camp needs time to train and recuperate. A capable general can lead the army to delay the spread of the White Lotus sect's thieves. Li Jiao was startled when he heard this. According to what Zhao Qing said, how long will it take to wait for the training in the Beijing camp? 2 months. Zhao Kuangyan told the time without hesitation. Li Jiao narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard this. 2 months is indeed not a long time, but what kind of medicine did Zhao Kuangyan buy in his gourd? So, does Zhao Qing have any good generals to recommend? As soon as Li Jiao said this, Wu Xuan and the others immediately became quiet, praying that they would not be named. Seeing the appearance of these losers, Li Jiao's palms clenched tightly under his dragon robe, and he didn't even notice that his nails were digging into his flesh. I recommend Lin Chen to be the commander-in-chief of the military and horse divisions of the 5 cities. This person has both military and strategic skills and a good plan. He can take on such a big responsibility. If Lin Dutong doesn't want to, my brother Zhao Guangyi can do it. Zhao Guangyin's voice was sonorous, and the expression on his face was one of pure loyalty. Brother Zhao Guangyi. Li Jiao suddenly gave a chuckle that could not be detected by outsiders. He dared to think that Zhao Guangyin was waiting for him here. I finally took back some military power, but I would not let Zhao Guangyin take it away with such a scheme. In this case, I order Lin Chen to lead the soldiers of the 5-city army and horse division out of the city to put down the rebellion. Li Jiao, who had made a decision in his heart, issued the edict simply. This made Zhao Guangyin slightly frightened, wondering if the new emperor might have any other tricks up his sleeve. Zhao Guangyin was not allowed to think too much, and one of the eunuchs announced his resignation. The meeting is over. Zhao Guangyin, who returned to the mansion all the way, went straight to a quiet place. Brother, the little emperor would rather let his confidants die than give up the 5 cities army. Zhao Guangyi muttered at the side. The 5-city military division that guards the city gate is very important to their brother's future plans. Zhao Guangyin would be uneasy if his confidants were not in charge of this position. Nothing. Zhao Guangyin also showed no emotion or anger on his face, and just whispered, the lesser of 2 evils, this new emperor is also a decisive person. What's the use? It's not what you expected, brother. Zhao Guangyi smiled flatteringly. Zhao Guangyin shook his head slightly, turned to look at Zhao Guangyi, and lowered his voice. You should contact the messenger and inform them about Lin Chen. Afterwards, Zhao Guangyi's eyes turned cold when he heard this, and he nodded understandingly. This was the first time that Lin Chen was face to face with Li Jiao at such a close distance. I don't know what methods the new emperor used to make Lin Chen, an acquired warrior, unable to distinguish the traces of disguise on his body with his 6 senses. Lin Chen. Li Jiao suddenly spoke. I'm here. Lin Chen immediately put away his small thoughts and replied in a deep voice. Do you know that leading the army to delay the White Lotus sect this time will lead to a narrow escape from death? It is the duty of a minister to work for His Majesty. Lin Chen said righteously. Don't forget, Li Jiao knew that he was still healthy and serving in the palace. From a certain perspective, he is the other party's confidant. Troubled you. Li Jiao comforted Lin Chen with gentle words. Can Qing Lin know the art of war? Lin Chen saw that Li Jiao had changed the topic. After pondering for a moment, Lin Chen gave a vague reply, I know a little bit. Hearing this, the expression on Li Jiao's face did not change much, and he continued, if Lin Qing has any requests for this expedition, I will comply with them. Are you preparing yourself for the possibility of death? I am recruiting soldiers outside the city. I know. Lin Chen knew that at this time, even if he made some excessive demands, Li Jiao would agree. That being the case, I sincerely request you to open the arsenal and obtain more than 10,000 soldiers and armor to equip the soldiers. Li Jiao frowned slightly when he heard Lin Chen's request. After thinking for a long time, he reluctantly said a word. Can. When Lin Chen heard this, he felt relieved. The newly recruited soldiers of the 5 cities military and horse division are, to put it bluntly, civilian men. Think about it from another angle. The rebel army of the White Lotus sect are also civilians. Civilian husband versus civilian husband, it depends on who has better equipment. In ancient times, there was a huge gap in combat effectiveness between soldiers wearing armor and soldiers without armor. After all, if you strike with a knife, the armored person will most likely be fine. On the other hand, the other party can disembowel you with one strike. Furthermore, this arsenal contains the weapons and equipment used by the generals every year, and cannot be opened without the emperor's decree. You must know that the Beijing camp will only open its arsenal and equip armor when it goes out in war. It seems that the emperor is somewhat reluctant to part with these equipment for a cannon fodder. By the way, Lin Qing, I plan to give you someone to be your deputy. Lin Chen, who was already satisfied and planning to leave the palace, heard Li Jiao change his subject. Ying Lian, come out and meet Lin Du. Lin Chen couldn't help but narrow his eyes when he saw the heroic figure coming out from behind the screen. This was in the Emperor's inner palace, and she was actually wearing the bright red general's heavy armor and holding a silver spear. What shocked Lin Chen even more was what this woman said to him. Mu Guiying, I have met Lin Dotong. Lin Chen suppressed his desire to complain and stood up to salute. Tomorrow, I will go to the Lindu army to report. The girl nodded towards Lin Chen rather valiantly. Okay. Lin Chen waved his hand and agreed calmly. After leaving the palace, Lin Chen came all the way to the prince's mansion, only to see Shangguan Wan'er already waiting here. The frowning Shangguan Wan'er was seen looking at a certain memorial, so Lin Chen didn't even notice when he walked behind her. What's this? Shangguan Wan'er's face was startled when she heard the voice, and she subconsciously struck Lin Chen's heart with a pair of jade hands. Fortunately, Shangguan Wan'er reacted and stopped, and the thrust turned into a gentle slap. When did you come? I just arrived. You were fascinated when I saw Wan'er. Lin Chen said innocently. If I don't stop, your heart will be broken. I don't think Wan'er would murder her husband. Lin Chen took the jade hand, took the beauty into his arms and sat down, smiling. He struggled with Shangguan's wrist to no avail, so he sat down peacefully. Lin Chen looked at the contents of this memorial and his eyes narrowed slightly. What this report says. There are 12 prefectures and 46 counties in Gyeonggi province. The 2 prefectures and 7 counties were captured by the White Lotus sect thieves, and all the officials were beheaded. Now the White Lotus sect is still spreading to the capital, and there has been a wave of rebellion in 3 prefectures. These victims, who were waiting to die under the flood, were willing to use their only flesh and blood to bring down these high-ranking officials. At present, the White Lotus sect's rebel army has expanded to more than 200,000 people, and its scale is still increasing. Does the White Lotus sect only operate in Gyeonggi province? This Li Tang dynasty can be regarded as a unified dynasty with a vast territory. Yes, Shangguan Wan'er's voice was trembling, and she wanted to take away Lin Chen's demonic hand from her body. So, Wan'er, do you already know about me leading the army to suppress the rebellion? Lin Chen smelled the body fragrance of the beauty in his arms and felt a little crazy. I know, Your Majesty. In His Majesty's decree, you are promoted to the rank of General against Rebellion and promoted to the 5th rank. Just upgraded to level 3. Lin Chen clicked his tongue and thought. Certainly, if you are an ordinary official, it will take you 7 or 8 years to climb the 3rd level. I asked you to practice martial arts earlier, and now you are leading the army on an expedition, but life and death are unpredictable. Shangguan Wan'er's tone was a little solemn when she mentioned this matter. It only takes a few months, and my martial arts training won't improve much. At least it will prevent you from being hurt by stray arrows when fighting in the battle formation. Lin Chen heard the deep concern in Shangguan Wan'er's words. To be able to make this strange woman say these words, I think he has some status in her heart. Let's not mention this matter for now. Your Majesty has arranged a deputy for me. Who? Mu Guiying. When Shangguan Wan'er heard Lin Chen's words, a look of surprise flashed across her pretty face. It's actually her. According to Shangguan Wan'er's explanation, Mu Guiying was the daughter of a bandit whom Li Jiao had kept in the palace many years ago. Her father was killed by officers and soldiers, but she was rescued by Li Jiao. But he didn't expect this woman to not learn red makeup and love martial arts and military tactics. I wonder how much this Yinglian has learned from the art of war. Shangguan Wan'er's understanding of Mu Guiying was obviously limited to this. When Lin Chen heard this, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. Shangguan Wan'er had an indifferent attitude towards Mu Guiying, but Lin Chen was well aware of his abilities. If you look at the generals who have left their names in ancient history, the other party is also ranked high. In particular, his martial arts cultivation has reached a first-class level. At his age, he can be called a genius. Shangguan Wan'er, who didn't know what Lin Chen was thinking, breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that His Majesty asked Mu Guiying to accompany the army because he wanted to take you away when you were in danger. A first-class warrior, it is not too difficult to take someone away from the battlefield. Yeah, Lin Chen felt that this was definitely not what Li Jiao had in mind. Forget it, let's take it one step at a time. Lin Chen couldn't help but feel a surge of heat in his heart when he noticed the slightly rising body temperature of the beauty in his arms. He has a beautiful woman in his arms, but he is not Lu Shahui, and he cannot be a true gentleman. About an hour and a half later, Lin Chen just rode back to the 5 cities military and horse division. Just look that there is no one in the company. Lin Chen thought of something and went straight out of the city regardless of the darkness. Really, Lin Chen found the commanders who were recruiting soldiers in the refugee camp. Lord Tutong, Lord Tutong. Yang Ji knelt down on one knee and saluted. The other commanders also followed suit. How many soldiers are you recruiting now? Your Excellency, we have recruited 6,000 qualified soldiers. When Yang Ji talked about the results of recruiting soldiers, there was a hint of excitement on his face. Obviously, I didn't expect there to be so many qualified soldiers. Lin Chen was not too surprised. After all, those who were able to make it all the way to the capital alive had already been eliminated. In other words, nowadays, most of the disaster victims' camps are from qualified soldiers. How many people can be recruited by noon tomorrow? It can reach 20,000. Yang Ji replied respectfully. Okay, at noon tomorrow, your commander will lead his people to the arsenal to receive the armor. Lin Chen made arrangements for tomorrow and did not go home to enjoy the comfort of bed. Instead, he recruited soldiers on site together with Yang Ji and other troops from the 5 cities. It didn't stop until midnight. At the same time, news of the White Lotus sect's rebellion quietly spread throughout the capital. The other courtyard of Jia Mansion. A group of younger girls with different looks were studying famous figures in ancient books, making tea and discussing them. These carrot girls are naturally Lin Diyu and the female family members of the Jia family. Sister Lin, sister, I have heard someone say that there are many salt bandits in Yangzhou and Hangzhou, and they often enter the squire's house at night and plunder. Yingchun, what servants are you listening to? Sister Tanchun, I just want to ask. Just look at the 4 girls sitting across from each other. Yingchun has a lively personality, Tanchun laughs and curses, and the 2 girls start to fight. On the other hand, Jia Shichun's face was neither sad nor happy, and her delicate little face looked a little dull. Lin Diyu frowned slightly when she heard Jia Yingchun's question. After considering it carefully, she said, the private salt dealers in Jiangnan are indeed vicious. When I was at home in Jiangnan, I heard my father and officials talking about the quarrel between private salt dealers. These ladies of the world used to never leave the house without taking a single step forward. Now that I could hear something new from Lin Diyu, I couldn't help but become interested and begged Lin Diyu to tell more. Lian Jia Shichun's earlobes moved slightly, and her fair skin was quite beautiful. I'm afraid it will offend the ears of all my sisters if I tell you about such dirty things like fighting. But at this time, an excited figure broke into the other courtyard, shouting these words. The one who can run rampant in the backyard of the Jia family's female relatives is naturally the treasure in Jia's mother's palm, Jia Baoyu. Lin Diyu looked at this reckless figure and didn't say much. Last time, Jia Baoyu made a mistake and said that Lin Dayu's father was a national traitor, which made the girl sulky for several days. However, when children have conflicts, they will resolve over time. After seeing Jia Baoyu arrive, Tanchun couldn't help but start joking. Why does Baoyu come to Sister Lin every day? It seems that the relationship is good. Before Jia Baoyu could say anything, Lin Diyu retorted, I don't care. When Jia Baoyu heard this, he couldn't help but smile and was too embarrassed to say anything. Sisters, do you know that something big has happened in the capital? When Jia Baoyu saw him coming, the sisters didn't say anything and quickly found a topic. Event. The girls, who were still children at heart, looked at Jia Baoyu curiously. Jia Baoyu told the rumors he heard from his boy. Especially when Jia Baoyu talked about the rebellion of the White Lotus cult traders and the massacre of gentry and merchants in surrounding counties. There were looks of fear on the faces of these little girls. After all, rebellion is too far away for Lin Diyu and others. In addition, the rumors that Jia Baoyu heard were inaccurate, and it seemed that the White Lotus sect would arrive under the walls of the capital someday. What should I do? Sanchun of the Jia family also read some history books. If the capital city is captured by the rebels, they, the heirs of princes and nobles, will not end well. Why don't the ministers of the DPRK send troops to quell the rebellion? Seeing Lin Diyu ask this, Jia Baoyu became interested. He originally looked down upon these officials, and often described these people as greedy for life and afraid of death. This is just great. Jia Baoyu's words. But these carrot girls were so shocked that they didn't know what to do. Lin Diyu was wondering if she should kill herself for the sake of her daughter's family's reputation if the rebels entered the city, burned, killed and looted. Brother Bao, you are talking nonsense again. Never thought about this time. Wang Zifeng walked in, with a reproachful look on her charming face. How could the world of Li Tang be destroyed now just because of a group of White Lotus sect rebels? After hearing what Wang Zifeng said, the faces of these girls became better. Lin Dutong of the Five Cities Military and Horse Division has received the Holy Order and will go out of the city to quell the rebellion. Lin Dutong. This is the second time these girls have heard this name. Previously, Lin Dutong angrily killed profiteers for the victims. In the minds of girls like Lin Diyu, such actions were all done by those Qingming officials in the book. Naturally, I have a very good impression of it. I just learned today that Lin Dutong actually wants to lead an army to put down the rebellion. Could this Lin Dutong be said to be an all-rounder with both civil and military skills? Thinking of the image of the gentle and elegant Confucian general written in the book, these little girls couldn't help but have a strange look in their eyes. On the contrary, Jia Baoyu felt a little uncomfortable after hearing Wang Zifeng's words. That's it again. When it comes to Lin Chenjia, he loses his appeal among his sisters. Thinking of this, Jia Baoyu couldn't help but murmured, it's not Zhao Kuo, but it harmed the lives of the soldiers and himself. Brother Baoyu, how can you say that? Yingchun pursed her lips slightly and looked at Jia Baoyu angrily. Lin Diyu clenched her handkerchief tightly, with a look of anger on her fair face. Brother Bao, Lin Du is leading the army to suppress the rebellion for the sake of ordinary people like us. What you said was a mistake. Not long after, someone reported to Jia's mother that Jia Baoyu had quarreled with the Lin family's daughter again. When Mrs. Wang heard this, she stopped for a moment, even turning the beads in her hand. The same goes for Baoyu. He knew that the girl in the Lin family was a nuisance, but he still had to provoke her every day. Mrs. Wang thought of something, and a trace of gloom flashed in her eyes. She naturally knew the reason why Jia Mu allowed Jia Baoyu and Lin Diyu to get close. However, Mrs. Wang didn't like Lin Diyu very much. In her opinion, her son will definitely become a marquis and become a prime minister in the future. How can his head wife be such a sick and weak woman? However, Jia Mu heard what the servant said and said jokingly, this Baoyu, if his father were at home, he would probably be scolded. This Jia Zheng was originally just a leisure minister of the Ministry of Industry. But I didn't expect that there would be urgent government affairs to deal with today. This surprised many Jia family servants. Arsenal. Lin Chen looked at the middle-aged man in front of him who looked upright and had the temperament of a refined scholar. Master Jia, please open the arsenal. Lin Chen bowed his hand. This was the first time that Jia Zheng was in charge, and he was inevitably excited. At the same time, he looked at the soldiers behind Lin Chen. Each of them has extraordinary momentum, standing like a green pine. After standing here for half a quarter of an hour, I didn't see this group of soldiers whispering to each other. After all, Jia Zheng was born in martial arts and knew a little bit about military affairs. Soldiers with this appearance can be called a strong army. Open the arsenal. Jia Zheng naturally knew that this was the emperor's order, so he did not delay. The new large arsenal was opened, and a smell of tung oil oozed out from inside. This tung oil was used as an antiseptic method for ordnance in ancient times. Yangji, the humble position is here. Lead the soldiers in and take 10,000 pairs of leather armors, 6,000 cotton armors, 4,000 iron armors, and 20,000 swords, guns and arrows. Yes, Lin Chen looked away when he saw Yangji leading the soldiers in. He noticed. Jia Zheng kept staring at him. Lin Chen couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This guy doesn't seem to have the skills of Long Yang, right? This thought inexplicably flashed through Lin Chen's head, and at the same time he moved his feet, subconsciously moving further away from the other party. In ancient times, the so-called large armies often number in the hundreds of thousands. In fact, 70% of them are civilian workers who are responsible for transporting food. There are not many soldiers who actually fight in armor. Wearing armor at the same time also makes a difference. The most elite soldiers must be full-body armored cans with several layers of cotton armor and silk inside as fillers. This type of soldier functions much like a tank in modern times. It is used to charge into the battle, be the first to attack the city, and be invincible. The leather armor and cotton armor have acceptable defensive capabilities. What's more, Lin Chen still had a plan in his mind, and he just wanted to wait until he left the city. Return to Jia Zheng. Lin Chen naturally didn't know that when Jia Zheng looked at him, he was lamenting the gap between people. The Lin Dutong in front of him looked a few years older than Jia Baoyu, although his face was covered with a ghostly face. In contrast, the other party led an army of 10,000 people to go out for battle, but Jia Baoyu still stayed in his daughter's boudoir all day long. Thinking of this, Jia Zheng felt his blood pressure rise. When I go back this time, I will definitely let Jia Baoyu study hard in the clan school. Jia Zheng, who had made up his mind, also became interested in Lin Chen and walked forward to chat with a smile. Lin Dutong, are you a descendant of Lin Shangcheng? In his mind, Jia Zheng went through all the families named Lin among the martial arts in the capital. This Lin Shangcheng was also an old member of the late emperor, and he was also granted the title of third-class marquis after the war. When Lin Chen heard this, he glanced at Jia Zheng in surprise, then shook his head. Lin is just an orphan. Hiss. When Jia Zheng heard this, he took a breath of air. If you have no background and can serve as the governor at such an age, you are definitely a close confidant of the emperor. Although Jia Zheng's qualifications are mediocre, his work can be called pedantic. But I have to admit that the other person is the kind of honest person Lin Chen is willing to deal with. Naturally, Lin Chen was also willing to chat more with the other party. Never thought about it, but Jia Zheng felt that Lin Chen's speech was quite extraordinary, and he was so excited that he invited Lin Chen to visit Jia's house when he had time. Originally, Lin Chen was ready to refuse. However, Jia Zheng's next words made Lin Chen swallow back the polite refusal that was on his lips. A certain family is not well versed in military strategy. Now I have a very pleasant conversation with Lin Dutong. I still have the military manuscripts left by the Duke at home. I would like to borrow them for Dutong to review. You must know that the two princes of the Jia mansion obtained their titles by fighting with the first emperor Li Tang with swords and guns. One family has two masters, which shows how much credit the other party has made. The military writings of such a powerful person were very attractive to Lin Chen, a general who was about to go on an expedition. It's okay for you to ask Lin Chen to plan military and national policies. Leading troops to fight is completely confused. Originally, Lin Chen planned to learn from Zhang Guofen's example, fight a dull battle and build a stronghold. Now that Jia Guogong has military writings, he will not be polite. Immediately, Lin Chen asked Yang Ji to transport the ordnance back to the camp and wait for Mu Guiying to arrive before distributing the ordnance. He planned to follow Jia Zheng and visit Jia's mansion. Then Lin thanked Mr. Jia in advance. In this way, the two chatted happily all the way from Jia's house. Under Jia Zheng's arrangement, Lin Chen went straight to the study room and looked at the military books placed in the study cabinet, which were already gathering dust. Tisk. Lin Chen laughed at himself and shook his head. He picked up a roll of bamboo slips, gently shook off the dust, and started reading. In ancient times, the method of recording scrolls was mostly inscriptions on bamboo slips. I saw 4 characters in capital letters on the bamboo slip, Jia Gongjun Lu. The entire military strategy contains only about 8,000 words. Compared with the millions of modern books, these 8,000 words are condensed. Lin Chen watched the military strategy begin. It is not the various strategies he thought of, but how to train soldiers and select talented people from them. In the next article, I will talk about how to organize an army march. As the saying goes, if there are more than 10,000 people, there will be no boundaries. If you want to command tens of thousands of soldiers and horses to march, just how to let these people go to the toilet and how to choose a site to build a camp is a science. Have to say, this book Jia Gong's military strategy opened Lin Chen's eyes. It turns out that being a general in ancient times was not just about talking and letting your subordinates finish the job. It is not enough to lead the soldiers to the battlefield and rush into fight. If a person who knows nothing is allowed to lead an army of 10,000 people on a long journey to Bel Maybe everyone has fled before we even get to the place. If you want to win, you must not let go of the strategy hidden in the details. Lin Chen was amazed and planned to memorize these 8,000 words. Even if you can't understand everything, you can still follow the instructions. But don't want to. Jia Zheng invited Lin Dutong. I don't know which boy leaked the information, and it spread immediately in Jia's house. Wang Zifeng was originally comforting Lin Diyu, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying. This girl was so beautiful that even she was amazed. It's this slightly petty and sincere attitude that makes people don't know what to say. At this time, Tanchun poked his head into Lin Diyu's boudoir. Sister Lin, let me tell you, Lin Dutong was invited as a guest by Mr. Zheng. When Lin Diyu heard this, her sobs stopped slightly. Seeing that it was effective, Tanchun continued to lower his voice and said, Bao Yu was seen hanging out with a few boys when Master Zheng came back. He was spanked and told that he had to go to the clan school tomorrow. Tanchun, you said Lin Dutong came to the house. What Tanchun didn't expect was that the one who had the biggest reaction was Mistress Lien. Just looking at this young lady, there was an unnatural blush on her face and her body was a little twitchy. Sister Feng, are you feeling unwell? Tanchun was startled. No, it's okay, I can just go and rest by myself. With that said, Wang Zifeng walked out of Lin Diyu's boudoir holding the handkerchief, and pretending to be casual, asked the boy where Lin Chen was at Jia's house. The master said that Mr. Lin came to Jia's house to watch the art of war left by Mr. Jia, so that my servants and I should not disturb him. When Wang Zifeng heard this, she pretended to be fine and waved the boys to go down. But don't want to. Second Mistress Lien, who waited for the others to leave, sneaked into the study room in the side courtyard like a thief. Lin Chen heard the sudden push of the door and looked back subconsciously. I thought it was the boy Jia Zheng ordered to come over to deliver tea. But he didn't expect that it was Mistress Lien with a blushing face. I saw beads of sweat on her smooth forehead. I don't know if it was due to heat or some other reason. Is it you? When Lin Chen saw the other party, his tone couldn't help but become playful. Second Mistress Lien has also learned how to taste the marrow. This Feng lazy doesn't show weakness. What's wrong with me? I didn't expect that your enemy would dare to come to Jia's house. If people knew what you did to me, would you be able to walk out? Wang Zifeng smiled sweetly and moved slightly in front of Lin Chen. This woman, if she kept her mouth shut, would still be a beauty in the world. It's a pity that there is an extra mouth. Lin Chen suddenly raised his head and looked at Wang Zifeng's rosy little mouth. Suddenly, Master Lin, this is the tea that Mr. Zheng ordered me to bring. A young boy knocked on the door. Come in. Lin Chen sat upright in front of the desk, tall and straight, and motioned to the boy to put the tea on the desk. The boy seemed to have heard some slight movement just now, and looked into the study room with a blank look on his face. Mr. Lin, what sounds did you hear in the room just now? Voice, did you hear it wrong? Lin Chen frowned, pretending to be impatient, and waved to indicate that the other party could go out. See the other person leave. Lin Chen just reached out and touched under the desk, signaling to Wang Zifeng who was lying under the desk. My enemy, I don't know where you learned these embarrassing moves. Lin Chen chuckled and said nothing, gently stroking the messy hair on Wang Zifeng's forehead. At this time, he somewhat understood what the ancients meant when they said that red sleeves add fragrance. Unfortunately, Wang Zifeng's aggressive personality somewhat spoiled the atmosphere. You cheated me out of 10,000 taels of silver last time, so this is compensation. Lin Chen pinched Wang Zifeng's smooth, gentle face and said with a chuckle. When Wang Zifeng heard this, the blush on her face became a little unnatural. She didn't expect that Lin Chen even knew about this matter. Wang Zifeng, who thought she had kept Lin Chen in the dark, was suddenly exposed, but she felt a little embarrassed. Then let's settle it. Are you cleared? Lin Chen pretended to be surprised. He looked at Wang Zifeng with a half smile, his tone was frivolous, and he raised his chin with his fingers. The leading courtesan in the Red Mansion can have a romantic affair for only 1,000 taels of silver, right? Hearing this, Wang Zifeng felt ashamed and angry, and started scratching Lin Chen. This guy actually compared her to those brothel girls. Wang Zifeng's strength naturally could not hurt Lin Chen. He held Wang Zifeng in his arms and pretended to himself. But when I think about it, Miss Jia Guogong is worth the price. When Wang Zifeng heard this, she did not continue to struggle. Instead, she sighed, with a hint of shame in her eyes. She is a married woman, but she can carry. Just thinking about her husband's usual philandering behavior, Wang Zifeng felt a lot of guilt disappear. In particular, recently, Zhao Lian got together with a cook. Wang Zifeng was so angry that he didn't let Zhao Lian into the house during this period. You must know that the cook and the boy are willing to spend some money to play with her. Wang Zifeng felt disgusted when she thought of this. Lin Chen could see some of the sorrow in Wang Zifeng's heart, but he didn't know how to persuade her. Is it possible that he, an adulterer, should be allowed to persuade Wang Zifeng to be more generous? How can it be? But now, you are my woman. Lin Chen pinched Wang Zifeng's chin and looked into her eyes. You can only do this kind of thing today with me, do you understand? Wang Zifeng couldn't help but sneer when she heard this. If you really want me, then my aunt will go and make peace with Zhao Lian right away. Come and marry me. There is a hint of sarcasm in this sentence. But don't want to. Lin Chen pondered for a moment under Wang Zifeng's surprised gaze. Not yet. In other words, does this enemy really have this idea? Lin Chen looked at Wang Zifeng, who was fleeing and couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. If he is not in the palace, he is also among the people. Since Wang Zifeng already has a relationship with him, it doesn't matter whether the other party is the duke's wife or not, just take him away. This Jia mansion cannot stop the prying eyes of an acquired warrior. Whatever. Let's calm down the incident in the White Lotus sect first. After reading the military notes left by Duke Jia Guo, Lin Chen was just about to leave. It's just that as an acquired warrior, Lin Chen's sixth senses are so sharp. He immediately looked behind a rockery. He only looked at a few carrot girls who were still young but already beautiful women, looking at him cautiously. Among this group of little girls, the one who looks like a sickly shizi is probably the legendary Lin Diyu. Lin Chen thought thoughtfully, and then said goodbye to Jia Zheng. Riding horses all the way to Lin Chen outside the capital, he looked at the prototype of the military camp that had been built. The soldiers recruited by the 5 cities military and horse division were all stationed here. General Wang Bai, what kind of military posture have you been standing in all day? Is it useful? When Wang Wu heard the complaints of this group of newly recruited soldiers, his face darkened. Whoever is unwilling to stand, then return the money and food and get out of the camp. This time, the 90 newly recruited soldiers did not move and stood obediently. Seeing this, Wang Wu nodded with satisfaction. Keep an eye on them, follow the methods of Lord Dutong, and let them understand what discipline is first. Wang Wu said to several soldiers in the same team. The latter smiled and nodded after hearing this. Most of the veterans of the 5 cities soldiers and horses division have been promoted. Wang Wu was also promoted to a 100-man general by firewire. Several of his previous companions were promoted from soldiers to commanders. Now they, the old men of the 5 cities soldiers and horses division, know very well that their group will go to quell the rebellion. This made Wang Wu feel a little strange. After all, he was just a soldier of the 5 cities soldiers and horses division waiting to die. But, at this moment, Wang Wu didn't have much fear in his heart. Because he knew that Lord Dutong had said it. Soldiers who died on the battlefield not only received a pension of 30 taels of silver, but also food money every month to be given to the families of the soldiers who died in battle. According to Wang Wu's understanding of his family's capital, the other party was definitely not lying. In particular, after he was promoted to General of Hundreds, his matchmaker, who had previously looked down on him, often came to his home and talked about a certain girl who was very nice. Wang Wu just understood one thing. He is no longer a jerk now. This couldn't help but make Wang Wu feel a little more ambitious. This expedition to counter the rebellion is also an opportunity. He wants to make meritorious service and be promoted to commander. You have to be a commander no matter what. In particular, the girl Wang Wu liked in his heart was the daughter of a cloth merchant. 100 people of mine are going to propose marriage, and the other party will most likely not look at it. It's different if you are a commander, you can already be considered an official. Call the army lieutenant colonel. The first thing Lin Chen did when he entered the camp was to summon Yang Ji and others for a small meeting. Yes, When Yang Zhe learned that he had been promoted from commander to captain, he thought that he was with the wrong person. Although the school captain is only a 6th grade military attaché. However, from being a 6th grade military attaché, you have already crossed over from being a low-grade military attaché. You must know that there are so many low-grade military attaches in Litang, and many military attaches cannot go further until they die. Yang Ji knew very well that only by reaching the rank of 6th grade military attaché could he have the opportunity to continue climbing up. This is a good opportunity for him to shine on the Yang family. Especially when he thought that he had only worked under Lin Chen for less than 2 months, Yang Ji became even more grateful. Sometimes, following the right person is far more important than ability. Suddenly, Yang Ji thought of his several Yang brothers of the same clan and different generations. He knew that Lin Chen was in urgent need of people right now, so why didn't he write a letter and let these brothers from the same clan come to work for Lin Dutong? Yang Ji knew very well that his brothers from the same clan were no less capable than him. Furthermore, in Yang Ji's opinion, Lin Chen is a good boss worth following. No, Yang Ji, who planned to ask Lin Chen for instructions before writing a letter later, was rushing towards the Chinese army's tent. Lin Chen looked at Yang Ji, Wei Kung and others who were rushing over, and nodded imperceptibly. If this group of people slacked off because of their promotion, he would not show mercy. In the military tent, Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others looked at each other. The atmosphere in the military tent became strange after the appearance of a masked general in bright red armor. Lin Chen looked at Mu Guiying, whose mask looked the same as his own, and the corners of his mouth twitched. This is Vice General Mu. Lin Chen introduced Yang Ji and others. On the other hand, Yang Ji and others seemed a little unconvinced by this airborne second in command. After all, Lin Chen had conquered them through his abilities during this period, and Mu Guiying had no foundation at the moment. Lin Dutong. Suddenly, Mu Guiying spoke. That clear yet heroic voice sounded. Woman. This time, Yang Ji, Wei Kung and the others' eyes widened with disbelief on their faces. His Majesty's decree. Mu Guiying raised a bright yellow imperial edict from her waist. See this. Lin Chen led a group of generals to kneel down on one knee. My lord, Lin Chenjia accepts the order. By God's blessing, the emperor issued an edict. I heard that Lin Chenjia is both civil and military, and he is now attacking the rebels to stabilize the country. I am very pleased with him. He was named general of the cruel rebellion and was promoted to the 3rd level. At the same time, the imperial edict also included the promotion of Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others as school captains. In Litang, the names of these rebellious generals are generals with mixed names. Often the title will be revoked afterwards. However, the actual promotion of official rank will not change. At the moment, Lin Chen was already a 5th-rank military attaché with real power in the imperial court. Hearing this, Yang Ji, Wei Kung and the others also had a look of surprise on their faces. Although they had already learned about the promotion from Lin Chen, hearing it with their own ears now had a different feeling in their hearts. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty. After completing the last process, Lin Chen stood up to receive the order. General Lin, Your Majesty has given special permission to leave Beijing in 3 days to fight against thieves. Do you have any plans? After Mu Guiying processed the edict, he immediately got to the point. Lin Chen heard a hint of eagerness to try from the other party's tone. At the moment, General Lin's command only has 5,000 capable soldiers, and the remaining 20,000 are just civilians. Mu Guiying apparently investigated the situation of the soldiers clearly during the time he came to the camp. Oh, Lin Chen raised his eyebrows slightly and asked Mu Guiying with interest if he had any advice. If you come here, you need to practice vigorously. On the way, I will borrow some bandits from the capital to practice my skills. When I meet the thieves of the White Lotus sect, I will be able to train a capable soldier. When Lin Chen heard this, he couldn't help but say hello to Mu Guiying in his heart. There's nothing wrong with the other party's approach. However, Mu Guiying's implication was that she would be responsible for military training. Lin Chen had no doubt that Mu Guiying could take over the entire army during this period of time. He believed that Mu Guiying had this ability. Vice General Mu, the suggestion is very good, but I already have a plan in mind. Lin Chen's tone was unmoved. Mu Guiying looked at Lin Chen through the mask and remained silent. While not being able to see through Lin Chen's inner plan, it was also impossible for Lin Chen to see Mu Guiying's expression at this time. But come to think of it, this female general's expression must have been wonderful. After all, Mu Guiying knew that Lin Chen seemed to have never learned the art of war and was a complete amateur. However, if such a layman wants to lead tens of thousands of people to fight, isn't he going to die? Mu Guiying suppressed the anger in her heart, raised her gun and left the camp. After all, His Majesty said that she should not interfere with Lin Chen's decision-making. Shangguan Wan'er thought worse. This Mu Guiying was really Li Zhao's backup plan to take Lin Chen away at a dangerous moment. If this army is given to me, I will be sure to delay the White Lotus sect in the 3 prefectures. Mu Guiying's eyes flashed with confidence. After all, the White Lotus cult thieves are just an army of peasants. If they find a strong city to defend, the opponent will definitely be at a loss. There is a similar case in the military book Mu Guiying read. For example, the Yellow Turban Uprising at the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty. The massive Yellow Turban army was unable to capture Changxi, which was held by Wang Fusang. In the end, Wang Fusang found an opportunity and burned hundreds of thousands of Yellow Turban troops. Nature. Mu Guiying also wanted to follow this approach. In addition, if you want to defend the city, you don't need elite soldiers. No idea. This Lin Chen is arrogant. Thinking of this, the confidence in Mu Guiying's eyes turned into anger, and her teeth itched with anger. However, Mu Guiying did not give up and began to look for other methods. Under Mu Guiying's secret observation these days, Mu Guiying despaired of Lin Chen. I saw that this group of civilians, at Lin Chen's request, did not practice military formations and tactics every day. Instead, they were divided into countless groups and assigned dedicated personnel to train formations and turn left and right. Naturally, Mu Guiying had never heard of this method of military training. Just think that this is the product of Lin Chen's imagination. What made Mu Guiying even more angry was, Lin Chen selected 500 strong men with agile hands and feet, and asked these people to hold bamboo sticks, practice raising guns, and then fill them with sand and soil. Mu Guiying, who completely gave up on Lin Chen, chose to start with generals like Wei Cheng. Because as a close confidant of the emperor, she naturally has a natural appeal to these guards of the prince's palace. Similarly, Mu Guiying also knew that as a woman, it would be difficult for her to win over these gentlemen. So the method Mu Guiying chose was to catch Wei Cheng and others and beat them to death. Are you convinced? Auntie, we are convinced, we are really convinced. Wei Cheng and others, who had a bruised nose and swollen face, no longer dared to underestimate Mu Guiying. In the military, after all, it is a place where the strong are respected. Every day, Wei Cheng and others were caught in the camp and competed in the name of training. In the eyes of ordinary soldiers, his own high-ranking captain was beaten so badly by the red-clothed general, so he naturally felt a little more in awe. General Lin, Deputy General Mu. Yang Ji looked at Lin Chen, who was sitting upright and playing chess with him, but hesitated to speak. Don't worry about her, Lin Chen said lightly. He naturally knew what kind of calculation Mu Guiying had in mind. On the day of the expedition, Mu Guiying would naturally be able to see the soldiers who had been trained through hellish military training methods. Maybe he doesn't know how to fight, he's just a showman. It can be ordered and prohibited, and the square formation is definitely the pinnacle of the ancient army. Sometimes, looks can be used to scare people, right? 3 days have come. This day was when Lin Chen led his army out of Beijing. On this day, Li Zhao personally led his courtiers to watch the ceremony. Similarly, countless people in the capital rushed to see the excitement. All the civil and military nobles in the city occupied the best part of the city wall, waiting to see the excitement. Naturally, many people came from the Jia family. Except for Jia Mu, who never went out because she was old. The other descendants of the Jia family came to the city wall, waiting for something. Sister Lin, General Lin will lead his army out of the city from here today. Tanchun spoke in a low voice to prevent Jia Baoyu, who was not far away, from hearing. Lin Daiyu glanced at Tanchun angrily. I was just curious about Lin Dutong, who seemed to be a boudoir who missed her lover. I'm coming. Suddenly, there was a burst of noise. Lin Chen, who was sitting on a group of tall horses, had a tall figure and a calm temperament. What made the people in the capital uproar was the soldiers wearing armor and holding swords, 4 in a row, seemed to be in a line, marching in uniform steps. A small military parade shocked the ancients. The footsteps seemed to converge into one sound, and someone on the city wall was seen crushing city bricks. Is this a civilian husband who has just been recruited for less than 4 days? Zhao Kuangyan looked at the soldiers on the street with neat steps and high spirits with an expressionless face. It is no exaggeration to say that even the 5 guards of Yu who have been training for several years cannot catch up with him. Zhao Kuangyan let go of the brick wall that had turned into powder, and looked at Lin Chen, who was wearing the general's armor at the front of the queue, with cold eyes. Lin Chen felt an inexplicable murderous intention coming towards him. When he raised his head and looked around, he could not find the source of the murderous intention. Not only Zhao Kuangyan was shocked after seeing these soldiers and the ordinary people in the capital. In their impression, the soldiers should all have tattered armor and look lazy carrying long spears. Because the soldiers in the capital seen by the people in the capital have this virtue. Never thought about it. Seeing such an army that looked like the elite of hundreds of battles, I couldn't suppress the excitement in my heart for a while, and shouted loudly. Color, color. Deafening cheers resounded throughout the capital. Li Zhao's mood at this time was also unable to calm down. The face of the army in front of him almost matched his imagination of elites. These the soldiers that Lin Chen trained in a few days. If Han Xin, the soldier immortal, was still alive, that would be the case, right? Shangguan Wan'er also stared blankly at Lin Chen on top of the tall horse. She was so shocked that she didn't know how to describe it. At this time, everyone's eyes were fixed on this army. Lin Chen looked at the emperor's chariot who was seeing him off and raised his hand. Brush. The soldier who stood at attention for a moment looked at the sound and shadow on the bright yellow imperial chariot. They all know that this is His Majesty the Emperor. If it had been a few days ago, he would have been so frightened that he would have knelt down and kowtowed when he saw the other party. However, the soldiers who have been trained with sticks now know that without orders, they will go through mountains of swords and seas of fire. See Your Majesty. Lin Chen knelt down on one knee and saluted. See Your Majesty. The soldiers responded. The praises that echoed through the sky made Li Zhao couldn't help but stand up. This was the first time he knew that it was such a joyful thing for soldiers to surrender. Okay. Li Zhao, who said twice excitedly, forced himself to calm down and said, Pingshan. Wow, just listen to the collision of armor and iron pieces. But these soldiers who got up made no sound. On the city wall. In the eyes of the families of these distinguished ministers, the soldiers are just a bunch of stinky soldiers. Now that I saw what the soldiers looked like with my own eyes, I was speechless. Lin Daiyu and the 3 daughters of the Jia family are already obsessed with it. Although Jia Baoyu had ups and downs in his heart, he still muttered stiffly, how can a group of people who are fighting against each other get this honor? Unfortunately, this whisper was heard by Sister Lin. As the saying goes, a person's character can be seen from his words. Originally, Lin Daiyu thought that Jia Baoyu was a clever and intelligent man. At present, it seems that the other party is a person who only knows lies and does not understand suffering. You must know that Lin Daiyu was raised by Lin Ruai before she entered Jia's house. Lin Ruai, as the top candidate in the imperial examination, is naturally familiar with ancient and modern affairs. Under the influence of what she heard and saw, Lin Daiyu was far more knowledgeable than ordinary women. Li Zhao didn't say much nonsense, he just wished the soldiers returning from the expedition victorious. Immediately, Lin Chen led his army 30 miles out of the capital. At this moment, the one who is most shocked is Mu Guiying. She never expected it. Those soldiers who have been practicing walking in the school field all day are actually able to do this. Where is Captain Yang Ji? The humble position is here. Yang Ji heard Lin Chen's call and quickly rode forward. I order your troops to be the vanguard. Remember to send more scouts, open roads and fill holes along the way, and build a camp 20 miles away. Yes, Yang Ji didn't expect Lin Chen to ask him to be a pioneer, and he was immediately overjoyed. You must know that for the position of pioneer, it is much easier to achieve meritorious service. Lin Chen's instructions naturally made sense. Yang Ji's subordinates have the most veterans of the military and horse division in the 5 cities, and their combat effectiveness is much stronger than that of the showmen under his command. He didn't think that just by relying on this group of civilians who had only been trained for 4 days, they could go into battle and kill the enemy. Lin Chen made this gesture simply to scare people with ulterior motives. Because before he received Li Zhao's order to go to war, he was still investigating the theft of Bidakang. Judging from the news obtained from Zhao Min, there must be ministers in the court cooperating with the White Lotus people's actions. Therefore, Lin Chen had to be careful. Only, Mu Guiying, who didn't know what Lin Chen was thinking, raised her own objection. General Lin, is it too slow to travel 50 miles in one day? As the saying goes, soldiers are more valuable than speed. Lin Chen's mouth twitched slightly when he heard Mu Guiying's words. Is it possible that she has confidence in these honor guards under her? Even if Mu Guiying had confidence, Lin Chen himself didn't. The march is no longer fast, but steady. Don't say too much, the general has already considered it. After Lin Chen finished speaking in a deep voice, Mu Guiying actually became quiet. This surprised Lin Chen, but he soon felt relieved. Look, Mu Guiying was also more convinced of herself. As for Lin Chen's considerations, nature is very simple. Inside the temporary military camp, the 500 soldiers who were carefully selected by Lin Chen had many expressions of bewilderment on their faces. After all, in the previous school field, they made many colleagues laugh because of their strange training methods. Even they don't understand why they need to be trained to pack sand and soil on a bamboo stick. Can't help it. This group of confused soldiers turned their attention to their commander Lin Chen. Lin Chen was not recruited by disaster victims. The opponent was originally a city gate guard in the 5 cities soldiers and horses division. But don't want to. After Lin Chen learned his name, he was roped in to serve as the commander of the so-called Shenji battalion. Although Lin Chen didn't know why his master valued him so much, he also knew that a scholar would die for his confidant. During this period, he trained the hardest. In 1 minute, you can fill the bamboo stick with sand 3 times. Gululu. Just listen to the sound of wheels. The soldiers of the Shenji battalion just looked this way. Just look at these bullock carts filled with long boxes, and my own master Lin is also here. Lin Chen, the humble position is here. Lin Chen looked at the man in front of him who was strong but somewhat unattractive. He never thought that he also had members from water margin. That was Hongtian Lei Liangjun. It's a pity that Li Tang in this era did not have firearms, so naturally he did not create this name. But, in Lin Chen's hands, this Lin Chen was a rare talent. Especially during this period of training, the opponent's talent in handling firearms made Lin Chen sure that he had not found the wrong person. Unload the boxes. Crash. Big boxes were placed on the ground one by one. Under the surprised gazes of the soldiers of the Shenji battalion, Lin Chen took out a strange long stick to hold items. After all, Lin Chen had the reputation of thundering in the water margin. When he saw this matchlock gun, he suddenly felt very familiar with it. Is it possible, what you and others are training are the strange weapons in the hands of General Lin? Raise the gun and stab straight. Yang Ji is training soldiers on how to use spears in the simple bulldozed school grounds. Nature. There are other captains training sword and shield soldiers in the camp. This army under Lin Chen's command is a very typical ancient army. Mainly sword, shield and spearmen, and some archers. As for the cavalry, only officers and scouts had horses. If we work together, we can gather 500 cavalry. Captain Yang, where is General Lin? Mu Guiying, who searched around the camp but couldn't find Lin Chen, found Yang Ji, Lin Chen's confidant. Hearing the voice of his aunt Mu Guiying, Yang Ji couldn't help but tremble. He also played against Mu Guiying. As for the results, it is self-evident. Yang Ji swallowed and tried to look calm. The general led the Shenji battalion out. Shenji camp. Hearing this name, Mu Guiying's mind flashed to the group of soldiers who used strange training methods. Mu Guiying originally thought that Lin Chen was fooling around. But what he saw today made Mu Guiying suspicious. Which direction are you going? Mu Guiying planned to follow him and take a look. Heading towards the eastern suburbs. Raise the gun. Lin Chen looked at the Shenji battalion soldiers standing in 3 rows and ordered coldly. Put. Boom. The refined particles of gunpowder exploded with huge energy, pushing the lead towards the earth's slope 100 steps away. Lin Chen only saw the lead marbles hitting countless smoke and dust like a rainstorm of pear blossoms. Hiss! All the Shenji battalion soldiers present couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Isn't this power too terrifying? Lin Chen looked indifferent and looked forward thoughtfully. It seems that the matchlock gun obtained from Xiaojiao should be a product of the late development stage of the matchlock gun. This is a matchlock gun with a caliber of 22 mm, a maximum range of 2,800 meters, and an accurate and effective range of 150 meters. Based on this power, it can completely penetrate the heavy armor of Western plate armor knights at a distance of 100 meters. If what had been shot was not the earth slope, but a group of charging flesh and blood bodies, maybe they would all fall down like wheat. Although Lin Chen didn't know modern matchlock tactics, he did know three-stage shooting. Immediately, let this group of Shenji camp soldiers perform three-stage shooting as they were trained. Yes, Lin Chen suppressed his excitement and began to command his soldiers. Boom, boom, this sound, like thunder on the ground, scared the birds flying around. Lin Chen looked at the Shenji battalion soldiers who were able to shoot continuously and nodded with satisfaction. This is his hidden card. For Li Tang, who was still in the era of cold weapons, the matchlock gun was already an epic-making product. Lin Chen felt that it was overqualified for use against the White Lotus sect's rebels. However, the big army in his hands is really useless. Even if he was given another 3 months, it wouldn't be like this. Lin Chen's six senses sensed the prying breath, and immediately picked the leaves and shot them in its direction. This aura is naturally that of Mu Guiying. Seeing the slowly advancing Shenji battalion in front of her, one can imagine her shock. Just when Mu Guiying lost her mind, she felt something sharp and piercing the air coming towards her. Mu Guiying's eyes narrowed, and immediately a kite turned over and fell from the tree. But don't want to. Before he even landed on the ground, someone grabbed his shoulder, and his whole body was controlled by the other person. Mu Guiying was about to use her strength to break away, but she saw Lin Chen's eyes that looked like a smile but not a smile. Mu Guiying's heart froze, but she noticed that her and Lin Chen's movements were almost touching each other. Mu Guiying, who couldn't help but blush, quickly started struggling. Lin Chen did not embarrass the other party and let go. Is this the way General Lin hides himself? Mu Guiying has not yet recovered from the performance of Shenji camp just now. How? Lin Chen wanted to hear Mu Guiying's thoughts. Mu Guiying was silent for a long time after hearing this, as if she didn't know how to describe it. At the same time, Altar Master, a White Lotus believer wearing a suit of fairly intact leather armor, hurriedly walked into the courtyard. This group of White Lotus followers, numbering approximately 30,000, had just looted a town near the county seat. Their altar owner calls himself the White Lotus Altar Envoy, and according to the divine decree of the Innocent Mother, he is specially sent to Earth to save the suffering people. This rhetoric is quite popular among disaster victims. After all, the White Lotus sect really distributes food. Then, the victims, led by the altar owner, swept through the countryside and killed the landlord and his family. The food collected allows the altar owner to recruit more victims. At the same time, it can also coerce some ordinary people and build momentum. Right now, this smug altar leader is thinking of ways to break through the county in front of him. If he can capture the county seat, his subordinates can continue to grow. After all, the food he collected from villages and towns was almost not enough to feed these tens of thousands of people. Only, this county official was not like the ones he had encountered before who collapsed at the first touch. On the contrary, he was very organized and called on the civilians and officers to guard the city. Don't look at the tens of thousands of people this altar leader has under his command. In fact, most of them are old, weak, sick and disabled. They say they are attacking the city, but in reality they are novices pecking each other. Often a burst of arrows shot down from the city wall would cause the White Lotus believers to flee in all directions, howling like ghosts. Still having a headache on how to pry open the altar master in the county seat, he heard the voice of his men outside the door. What's the matter? The altar owner looked gloomy, as if he was unhappy. Seeing their altar leader like this, the believers trembled. Altar master, there is an order from the holy envoy, saying that the imperial court has sent 30,000 troops to conquer, and we are here to bear the brunt. Oh, it's only 30,000 people, and I have a lot of people under my command. The altar leader said lightly, very confidently. Although he could barely count the number of brave soldiers in his own hands, they were only 10,000. There was no armor either, and many could only carry sharpened bamboo sticks. But in the opinion of the altar owner, this so-called imperial army is no different from many county government soldiers. If those guys saw him coming to attack them, they would probably turn around and run away just like before. Altar master, don't be careless. The believer frowned and advised his altar master with some worry. Stop talking. How far are the imperial army from us? About 100 miles. It's just right. I just have some time to wait and see. Let's wait and see. This altar leader has also listened to some Three Kingdoms dramas, and he knows how to fight a war. No idea. This imperial army moved much slower than he imagined. This 100 miles of land. The other party has been gone for 3 full days. Haha, these rats took so long. The altar leader was overjoyed. Wait for tomorrow, I will personally lead you to kill the opponent until he loses his armor. The owner of the altar danced like a tiger with a ghost-headed sword that he had snatched from a certain executioner. Good. Follow the altar master and kill those imperial lackeys. The altar leader is naturally capable of sitting in this position. The realm of a third-rate warrior is what he relies on. Lin Chen perfectly implemented Zhang Guofan's combat theory of forming a stronghold and fighting a dull war. So much so that Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others were a little stunned, wondering whether their general was too conservative. In particular, Mu Guiying took the scouts to investigate the situation of the White Lotus sect thieves nearby. General Lin, why are you so careful? Mu Guiying was extremely dissatisfied with Lin Chen's behavior of walking 100 miles in 3 days. On this 100-mile journey, Lin Chen actually built 4 camps. This camp has pits for resisting horses, and the walls are made of cut solid wood. Originally, Mu Guiying thought that Lin Chen was talking about defeat before winning, so he built camps along the way just in case. But when Lin Chen started building the 4th camp, Mu Guiying couldn't bear it anymore. Please give me 5,000 soldiers, General. Mu Guiying thought. As for the ragtag group of White Lotus sect, as long as she leads the army to attack them, they will be able to kill them and make them flee. Inside the military tent, after Mu Guiying finished speaking, Yang Ji and other captains all asked to fight, willing to be the vanguard. Only Lin Chen's face and expression remained unchanged, and he just moved his fingers one by one on the map. We will discuss the matter of fighting tomorrow. After saying that, Lin Chen turned around and left the military tent, leaving Yang Ji and others looking at each other in shock. I wonder if our adults are too careful. Wei Cheng couldn't help but curse. A group of White Lotus sect thieves who don't even have any clothes or armor. Excluding the young and old, there are only 10,000 capable warriors. Yang Ji was also hesitant to speak, but he did not say what was in his heart. Snort. Only Mu Guiying waved her sleeves and left, seemingly going to find Lin Chen to argue. Mu Guiying quickly found Lin Chen. The other party was watching Wotujun throw some pine branches and needles into the cauldron and boil them into soup. This was also a strange order issued by Lin Chen. Every soldier must drink a bowl 3 times a day. Mu Guiying naturally didn't understand why Lin Chen wanted the soldiers to drink this dry and difficult to swallow leaf water. Mu Guiying walked up to Lin Chen and asked unceremoniously, General Lin, are you acting cowardly? Lin Chen was unmoved when he heard Mu Guiying's questioning. Vice General Mu, pay attention to your identity. The implication, she is the deputy general and cannot dictate to the chief general. You, Mu Guiying, who was obviously choked by Lin Chen's words, turned away angrily. But Mu Guiying didn't notice that Lin Chen watched her leave with a teasing look in his eyes. After all, Mu Guiying was also a novice at this time. Although his military talent is outstanding, he is still a little immature. Even if Mu Guiying could tell at a glance that these White Lotus cult thieves could only be regarded as rogue bandits, they could be defeated with just a large army charge. Although Lin Chen was also a newbie on the battlefield, he was a little more cautious than Mu Guiying. After all, people would die in a war, as he had seen from observing the terrain earlier. This place is the topography of the gourd mouth and the waist of the bag. At present, the army is building a camp just at the waist of Bu Dai, and behind it is Huluko. The so-called Huluko refers to a narrow path with either forest or rock walls on both sides. What if you rush into the bag or get dumped by someone? When it was known that there was a traitor in the capital, the whereabouts of the army he led were unilaterally transparent to the White Lotus sect. He did not believe that these White Lotus sect rebel forces who wanted to approach the capital would remain indifferent. Consider this as a premise. Lin Chen consciously wanted to annihilate his army, so this place was very good. Therefore, Lin Chen had just built 3 strong camps on the retreat route from Huluko and placed 2,000 soldiers to guard them. Let's watch it for now. Mom, these officers and soldiers are really dumb. The leader of the White Lotus sect was a little depressed. For 2 days in a row, he led his people to shout, but the other party remained unmoved. It was as if he was determined to stay within the camp. Tomorrow, I'll call for the formation again. The altar owner thought of something and smiled. He planned to adopt the advice given by his counselors, which was to give the officer and soldier a woman's clothes, mocking him as a woman without eggs. He had no courage at all. On the 3rd day, the weather was just right. Crash. Tens of thousands of soldiers from the White Lotus sect were seen dragging towards the camp where Lin Chen was. As the saying goes, if there are more than 10,000 people, there is no limit. The black head is enough to make people with trypophobia panic. Hey, that little turtle, come out. Following the example of the altar leader in the 3 Kingdoms storytelling, the altar leader holds a knife in one hand and brandishes a piece of women's clothing with the other. But I didn't expect it. Before he could say anything, the door of the military camp was opened with a bang. Thieves suffer death. These days, Yang Ji and other generals are almost exhausted. If it weren't for Lin Chen's suppression, these guys really couldn't stand the yelling and scolding of the White Lotus sect thieves outside and wanted to fight out. Now that Yang Ji had received Lin Chen's military order, he wished he could look up to the sky and roar twice. Especially when I saw the rude man brandishing the lingerie worn by women, my eyes were bloodshot. In the past 2 days, this person has been scolded the most. Straight fool, get off your horse and die. I saw Yang Ji leading the way, followed by 3,000 soldiers in formation. Stay in formation, stay in formation. Wang Wu tried his best to greet him, while his palms holding the spear were sweating. Although he is eager to make achievements, he will inevitably feel panicked when he actually goes to the battlefield. However, Wang Wu noticed. At this moment, the soldiers in the military formation were gnashing their teeth, and they were obviously angry at being scolded during this period. The altar owner looked at Yang Ji who was running towards him, his eyes widened, and the obscene garment he was waving in his hand fell from his hand, falling lightly to the ground. Mother, is this a second-rate master? The altar leader, who had just reacted, was stunned with fear. Hero, stay here. The altar leader was still about to say something, but he saw a cold light flashing from the lit steel spear in Yang Ji's hand. The altar master subconsciously wanted to raise the ghost-headed sword in his hand to block the door in front of him, but he felt a huge force that was about to break his wrist. Phew! Yang Ji lifted the spearhead that had penetrated the broadsword blade. The diameter of the big man's body flew away, and then he fell heavily to the ground. Pooh! Yang Ji spat at the other party's corpse. Yang Ji, who had no murderous look in his eyes, called on his soldiers to kill the White Lotus sect traitor who was looking dumbfounded in front of him. Follow my captain to kill the enemy. When Wang Wu and other sergeants saw how brave their captain was, their morale became even higher. Yang Ji, who immediately rode into the White Lotus sect's formation, flew away several thieves blocking the way in the blink of an eye, and poked several holes in their bodies. Failed, defeated. That guy is not a human being. For a time, the tens of thousands of White Lotus cult thieves were in chaos. Even those who tried to resist were overwhelmed by the howling and rushing soldiers. Lin Chen, who was on top of the village wall, looked at the current situation. Although he said he had won, he couldn't help but shake his head. Bad fight. These thieves of the White Lotus sect who have no courage can do well to see the blood of these soldiers. Only Mu Guiying, who was beside Lin Chen, watched with excitement. General, the army should be approaching at this time and pursue the defeated army. Oh, when Lin Chen heard this, he seemed to be smiling. Mu Guiying originally thought that Lin Chen would reject her proposal. Never thought about it. Lin Chen actually nodded in agreement. Wei Cheng, you and I will follow Vice General Mu out of the stronghold to pursue the defeated army. Yes. When Wei Cheng and other captains heard this, there was a strange look in their eyes. It's just that Mu Guiying was a little excited at this time and didn't notice this subtle change in expression. Kill. Amidst the loud shouts of killing, tens of thousands of soldiers rushed out of the military camp, and under the command of the school lieutenant, they attacked the White Lotus cult thieves. The morale of the White Lotus sect army, which had been able to survive the attack of 3,000 soldiers under Yang Ji's command, plummeted. If you don't run away now, you can only stay and wait for death. The White Lotus sect's army was instantly defeated for thousands of miles, and everyone just hated their parents for losing 2 legs. Mu Guiying, wearing a bright red armor and the BMW specially gifted by Li Jiao, was one step faster than Yang Ji and rushed into the White Lotus sect's defeated army. Lin Chen looked at Mu Guiying's figure with great interest and marveled. Here, Mu Guiying had a great time. During this time, all the depression in my heart disappeared. However, Mu Guiying was shocked to find out why there were no soldiers around him to follow him. Mu Guiying subconsciously turned her head and looked back. The expression under the evil ghost mask was extremely wonderful. Just looking at Yang Ji and his entourage, the word, Moyangdong, is almost written on their faces. One by one, they led the soldiers and turned back 3 times, as if they were ready to run away at any time. Buzz. Suddenly, the sound of horns was blown in Lin Chen's camp. Hearing such movement, Yang Ji and Wei Cheng just acted more quickly. At the same time, Fat and Thin Tutuo, who was observing the battlefield situation in a dense forest somewhere, frowned. There are a few fierce generals among these officers and soldiers. Look at the general wearing red clothes and red armor, and also wearing a ghost face. Is that Lin Chen's armor? Tisk, tisk, the first-class warrior must be Lin Chenjia. Hurry up and inform the holy envoy that Lin Chenjia has taken the bait. Just look. In this dense forest, a group of White Lotus sect soldiers with obviously different spirits were putting on their armor and mounting their horses. Woohoo! Right now, Mu Guiying suddenly heard a burst of bugles ringing in the dense forest from all directions. Before Mu Guiying could react, he saw thousands of armored cavalry rushing out from the forest on the left and right, with extraordinary momentum. After the cavalry, there were countless uniformed soldiers shouting to follow. This scene made Mu Guiying's eyes shrink suddenly. Is this a trap? Retreat, retreat quickly. Mu Guiying originally had some regrets in her heart. No idea. Just look at Yang Ji's group of people. After hearing the news, they immediately led their troops to retreat. Now, Mu Guiying understood. No wonder these guys didn't work hard just now. Did Ganqing receive instructions from someone? While Mu Guiying was angry, she was also shocked by Lin Chen's judgment. Is it possible that he already knew there was an ambush? When Mu Guiying turned around and returned to the village, this thought flashed through her mind. Lin Chen looked at the soldiers pouring out from all directions, his eyes slightly cold. The White Lotus rebels actually have cavalry. You must know that in ancient times, cavalry did not count as cavalry just by giving the opponent a horse to ride on. From a certain perspective, cavalry is also a high-tech branch. The money required to cultivate one can catch up to 10 infantry. But, the sound of the cavalry charging also made Lin Chen's eyes flash with a strange color. It was as powerful as a torrent, and seemed to be able to cut through any obstacle. Although Lin Chen was an acquired master, he did not want to face the charging cavalry directly on the plains. If coupled with heavy armor and horse armor, the resulting heavy cavalry. In ancient times, light cavalry played the leading role on battlefields. After all, heavy cavalry is expensive and has many restrictions. However, the power of heavy cavalry charging into battle is also devastating. However, the current situation did not allow Lin Chen to think too much. Open the village gate, Lin Chen said and asked Yang Ji and others to lead the army back to the camp. However, Lin Chen frowned slightly as he looked at the cavalry chasing after him. Especially the cavalry general who was charging in front of him was so imposing. Judging from the opponent's posture, he is trying to rush into the camp. Lin Chen curled up into a sneer and took out an arrow from the archer's quiver beside him. Call out, phew, The arrow that pierced the face of the horse army general caused him to be thrown off his horse, and was then crushed into pulp by countless horses' hooves. Really, Lin Chen's arrow dampened the momentum of the White Lotus cavalry. Fire the arrow. The archers who had been waiting on the wall of the village bent their bows and nocked arrows. Scattered arrows were fired at the charging cavalry. Nothing effective. Seeing this, Lin Chen turned around, walked down the village wall, and issued an order. Retreat and abandon the camp here. Behind the cavalry, there were 50 or 60,000 soldiers following. With the opponent being so aggressive, Lin Chen felt that there was no need to confront the opponent head-on. Then, Mu Guiying didn't even react. The army retreated again. Lin Chen chose to abandon the camp and retreat. The officers and soldiers escaped. The officers and soldiers escaped. The White Lotus cult thieves who discovered that the army was retreating cheered loudly. Keep chasing. Only, the man who was revered as the holy messenger had a gloomy expression. On the other hand, the fat and thin Tutuo beside him looked cheerful. Holy envoy, great victory. Yes, those officers and soldiers are really vulnerable. The two of them started to sneer at each other, but didn't see it. His own holy envoy's face became increasingly ugly. What kind of victory is this? The officers and soldiers were obviously wary of the ambush by themselves and others, so they chose to withdraw their troops. I just hope that by taking advantage of the momentum of victory and pursuit, the officers and soldiers can turn from retreat to rout. Thinking of this, the holy envoy drove his horse to follow. However, when the holy envoy saw this group of imperial officers and soldiers retreating into the same camp as before, his expression completely changed. Onslaught. Just look at countless White Lotus sect soldiers holding ladders and excitedly starting to attack the stronghold. The arrows blocked the horses, and the traps and iron caltrops caused the White Lotus soldiers to lose hundreds of people before they approached the gate of the village. After another period of fighting, suddenly I heard someone shouting in surprise. The officers and soldiers were defeated again. The officers and soldiers were defeated again. This time, in order to retreat, the officers and soldiers actually lit fires in the camp. When the holy envoy saw this, his face showed joy. Put out the fire and continue the pursuit. After half an hour of tossing, when the envoy who followed closely looked at the camp that appeared again in front of him, he fell into silence. At the same time, even the White Lotus priests who had high morale were also silent. The holy envoy suddenly thought of something and his face changed slightly. Not good. As the saying goes, do it all at once, second time tired, third time exhausted. Lin Chen reached out and took a point steel gun, and said indifferently, open the village gate, and follow me to kill the thief. Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others were eager to try, and looked at Lin Chen with awe. Turn out to be, all this is part of my master's plan. Really. After Lin Chen led his army out of the stronghold, the holy envoy shrank his eyes and tightened his grip on the reins. The White Lotus priests who had been chasing him all the way had a tired look on their faces. Look at the other side. Even though I have been running away for so long, I am still waiting for work. Chapter 51. The breeze blows in the forest. The terrain of Huluko is inherently narrow. Let alone arranging a large army, it was extremely difficult to even stand dozens of people side by side. Through his mask, Lin Chen looked at the White Lotus sect army, which was only 2 miles away, with indifferent eyes. Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and other captains came out on horseback and followed Lin Chen. The expressions on their faces were wonderful. From the perspective of Yang Ji and his party, Lin Chen had almost anticipated all the plans of the White Lotus cult thieves and counterattacked. The most shocked person was Mu Guiying. Among the people under Lin Chen's command, she was considered to have the highest level of military strategy. Therefore, Lin Chen's plan, which was so unpredictable, had just frightened her beyond measure. With the eyesight of Mu Guiying, a first-class warrior, he could clearly see the confusion on the face of the White Lotus sect thief. For them, originally, with the momentum of a great victory for the entire army, they pursued the enemy troops head-on. However, delayed by 2 companies of fortified camps, the momentum of these soldiers was not as good as before. All of them were sweating profusely and breathing heavily. The army has lost all its energy. On the other hand, the soldiers on Lin Chen's side were quite neat and tidy, without any panic. Because Lin Chen's soldiers knew very well that they still had a way out. Even if this camp can't stop the opponent, there is still one behind. At the same time, a panting young general came on horseback and asked the Holy Envoy, "Sir Holy Envoy, what should we do now?" After all, this Holy Envoy is the general assigned to command this army. Past, this Holy Envoy indeed showed great military strategy, helping the White Lotus sect to attack cities and fortresses in the Gyeonggi region. I thought that this ambush against the imperial officers and soldiers would be as easy and satisfying as before. Never thought about it. The successive changes in the situation left the young general a little confused. Fight or retreat? Not to mention that the young general didn't know what to do. Even the Holy Envoy's thoughts were extremely complicated. He has never seen a general with such a weird behavior. Fight. The Holy Envoy looked at the imperial army in front of him, which was waiting in formation and with the camp as a support, and he hesitated. He knew very well that the advantage of the White Lotus sect's large army could not be used due to the favorable geographical location. But the Holy Envoy looked at the 7,000 horse army under his command, which had relatively high morale. Enough. Charge with cavalry and completely crush the imperial army's formation. He didn't believe that the other party still had a way out. Once they are defeated, all they need to do is chase and kill the defeated troops. Lin Chen looked at the White Lotus cult soldiers who suddenly became commotion and chuckled. Look, the other party's generals were still unwilling to give up this great opportunity. So, why did Lin Chen go to such trouble to introduce the White Lotus sect army into this narrow gourd passage? Phew. A soldier of the White Lotus sect's horse army comforted the snoring horse as he sat down, holding on to the air rifle that was already stained with sweat and blood. The infantry of the White Lotus sect were instructed to move out of the way to give the horse army enough charging distance. The White Lotus cavalry troops, arranged in a line of 30 people, planned to use a cone-shaped formation to penetrate the official army formation in front of them. Da, da da, da da da. Just listen to the black cavalry that is gradually speeding up, and then like the tide of the Kyeontang River, it rushes towards Lin Chen's soldiers. Gulu. Wang Wu looked at the cavalry coming with the force of destruction of heaven and earth. He stood firm on his already weak legs and shouted instinctively, "Those who retreat before the battle, behead them." After saying that, he raised the long knife in his hand. Lin Chen looked at the charging horse army, his eyes unchanged. Shenji camp. Along with his heavy arm swing, the Holy Envoy of the White Lotus sect only saw a group of soldiers holding strange short spears walking out of the formation of officers and soldiers who were striding away. Ha ha. Seeing the costumes of these soldiers, the Holy Envoy couldn't help laughing. The opposing general did not want to use a long spear formation to countermount, but let these soldiers armed with short spears come to the front. The image of his own cavalry smashing through the opponent's army formation already appeared in the Holy Envoy's mind. 300 steps, 200 steps. Cold sweat broke out on the foreheads of many soldiers of the Shenji battalion who were holding matchlock guns tightly. Thanks to Lin Chen's training during this period, they were able to stabilize themselves. Listen to my order and raise your gun. Ling Zhen also wiped the beads of sweat on his cheeks and shouted, pretending to be calm. This is emboldening himself. Archers, shoot your arrows. Lin Chen watched the White Lotus cavalry army enter the bow and arrow range and immediately gave the order. Give an order. Just look at the not-so-dense arrows falling towards the cavalry in the front. However, the arrows that clanked on the cavalry armor only caused sporadic results. Those cavalrymen who were shot in the arms and thighs by arrows could still endure their injuries and continue to charge. 180 steps, 150 steps, 120 steps. Let go. Ling Zhen shouted at the top of his lungs when he saw that the enemy's cavalry had already entered the range of the matchlock gun. Bang bang bang. There was a deafening thunder. The White Lotus cavalry charging at the front could only see a puff of smoke and dust, and then there was nothing behind it. The dozen or so soldiers at the front felt their eyes darken, and liquid was still leaking from somewhere on their bodies. This is not over yet. Just watch the row of soldiers from the Shenji battalion turn around and retreat, and the second row fills in. Boom. Another uniform volley. This time, dozens of people fell off their horses, and the neighing and wailing war horses gave out their front hooves, slamming the rider to the ground. Rush. Rush over. The White Lotus cavalry who was in the back row and didn't know how their comrades died saw the speed slow down and couldn't help shouting. It would be tantamount to suicide for the cavalry to lose speed in such a small area. However, after witnessing his colleagues being killed by a group of people armed with strange weapons 100 steps away, the cavalrymen in the front row stared with horror on their faces. Boom! Another volley. You must know that a soldier who is skilled in using a matchlock gun can fire 4 rounds in 1 minute. In addition, the soldiers of the Shenji battalion who used 3-stage shooting came forward one after another in rotation. Many White Lotus cavalry could only hear the continuous roar, and then something would take away the lives of more than a dozen companions. Riots inevitably occur in the charging ranks. Faced with unknown death, humans often show little courage. Magic. Officers and soldiers know magic. These White Lotus sect believers can only think of this reason. But, in this narrow area, it is not possible to retreat if you want. The cavalry in the front row could only be forced to charge forward by their colleagues in the rear, looking at the Shenji battalion soldiers who were raising their guns in an orderly manner with a look of horror on their faces. It's close, only 50 steps away. At this distance, soldiers with good eyesight can see the expressions on each other's faces. The holy messenger's breathing quickened. At this distance, as long as they could rush into the Imperial Army formation, it would be a massacre. Even if the opponent uses some weird weapon, it doesn't matter. However, just listen to the clicking sound. The horses in the front row all fell to the ground. How could he not arrange something as convenient and simple as a trap in advance? The so-called horse pit is to dig a hole in the ground that can be as big as a fist. A war horse charging at high speed will only end up with a broken leg once its hoof steps on it. These horses tumbling on the ground formed a chain reaction like dominoes. The rear cavalrymen who could not evade could only watch their colleagues and horses falling to the ground. Just 50 steps. At this time, it was like a chasm. Finally, someone couldn't stand such a suicidal charge and immediately turned his horse's head. However, this time, it caused even greater chaos. When Lin Chen saw this, a smile appeared on his face. On the other hand, Yangji and others behind Lin Chen were dumbfounded. Unlike Mu Guiying, this was the first time they saw the matchlock gun in the hands of the Shenji battalion. What is this thing? When Yangji heard another volley, he groped around his body with lingering fear. The lead bullets fired by the matchlock gun are a fatal threat to third-rate warriors. Unlike arrows that can still be seen, lead bullets are propelled by gunpowder and have an extremely fast initial velocity. Not all warriors can use their inner strength to resist at first sight. Again, even a second-rate warrior cannot condense his inner strength into a shield. Before Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others could continue to think about anything, Lin Chen's cold voice sounded, "Cover and kill." After hearing this, all the captains came to their senses. In just 2 minutes, hundreds of these White Lotus sect horse troops were killed by the Shenji battalion. What really scares these White Lotus cavalry is the unknown. These White Lotus cavalry troops, who had no fighting spirit, had lost their fighting spirit. Kill. Hearing this, Yang Ji took the lead in riding out, followed by soldiers with equally excited expressions. Beating up a drowned dog is a hard-won opportunity for these soldiers who are new to the battlefield. Wang Wu was still on the way to charge, maintaining the battle formation. When he came to the White Lotus cavalry who was wailing on the ground, he raised his long knife under the horrified gaze of the other party. Phew, Wang Wu made the other party suffer no more. Kill. The holy envoy looked at the two-level reversal of the situation with a hint of bewilderment deep in his eyes. He didn't understand why he was defeated so inexplicably. But, looking at the cavalrymen who were fleeing, the holy envoy's pupils shrank. You know, these cavalry are rushing towards their own army formation. Why did tens of thousands of people defeat hundreds of thousands of armies in ancient wars? Human beings follow all living things. These foot soldiers of the White Lotus sect had no idea what was happening ahead. But looking at their fleeing companions, they would also wonder, could it be that the enemy is too brutal? Should I run with them? Driven by such thoughts, all the White Lotus infantrymen looked at each other in confusion. Get out of the way. These cavalrymen who had lost their courage now looked as crazy as evil ghosts. They just want to stay away from the group of imperial officers and soldiers who can cast evil spells. Then, many cavalrymen who could not slow down were hit hard by their own military formation. The terrain of Huluko, even if you want to escape, is limited by the terrain. Confusion. It completely spread among the White Lotus sect military formation. This is no longer something that the middle and low-level generals in the White Lotus army can suppress. In other words, these people also followed the clamor and fled for their lives. Trash. A bunch of trash. The holy envoy of the White Lotus sect was so angry that he drew his sword and killed a cavalryman who was fleeing. However, this does not help the overall situation. Holy messenger. When the fat and thin Tutuo saw that the holy envoy was trying to lead his bodyguards to stop the fleeing cavalry, he quickly grabbed him. If you lose, I'll leave first. Thief, where are you running? But before he had gone far, the holy envoy was spotted by Yangji and other captains. After all, the greatest military achievement is to kill the general and capture the flag. Seeing the opponent's general here, Yangji and other eager captains rushed over. Arrogant. A White Lotus sect young general was furious when he heard this. Immediately he rode towards Yangji with a spear. However, the figures of both sides are just a staggered one. Yangji laughed loudly and poked holes in the opponent's body with his spear, then threw him to the ground with both arms. But you've just entered the second-rate realm, and you still dare to show off your power. Yangji spat at the opponent and shouted disdainfully. You must know that fighting on the battlefield is different from fighting between warriors, and it also requires a quick response. All you need to fight on the battlefield is fierceness and speed. If this young general is not careless, he may be able to survive dozens more rounds in Yangji's hands. Yangji picked the young general with his gun, and the fat and thin Tutuo next to the holy envoy took a breath of air. That young general was one of the 24 guardians in the sect. He had outstanding martial arts talent, but he had already entered the realm of a second-rate warrior in his 20s. But he didn't expect to be shot dead by the green-faced general. Lord Holy Envoy, let's go quickly. Fatty Tutuo's heart trembled, and he pulled the other person to run away. Perhaps neither of them could resist such a vicious person. Mu Guiying looked at the one-sided situation and couldn't help but tighten the reins. She also wanted to have a good fight with her horse and gun. But Mu Guiying, who had learned from the past, couldn't help but lower her head, and her aura was a little low. Vice General Mu. Suddenly, however, Lin Chen scolded with a dissatisfied tone, why are you still standing here? Why don't you all attack us? When Mu Guiying heard this, a trace of shock appeared in her eyes under the mask. Yes, Mu Guiying, who had no time to think too much, answered with a hint of excitement in her voice. Lin Chen couldn't help but laugh as he looked at the opponent's figure rushing into the battle. Mu Guiying's thoughts are easy to figure out. Just like Zhao Kuo, who consciously read the military books thoroughly as a genius. Certainly, although Lin Chen was new to the battlefield, he knew he was cautious. If not, I'm afraid he would have fallen into the White Lotus sect scheme and become a dumpling. Thinking of this, Lin Chen's mood naturally became a little turbulent. Every man has imagined the heroic spirit of commanding thousands of troops to fight on the battlefield. But what he saw and heard today was nothing but ruthlessness and cunning by any means necessary. Fortunately, he was the one who succeeded in his calculation. In this short span of more than 10 miles, the Huluko terrain left approximately 10,000 corpses behind in the White Lotus sect's army, and countless people were ambushed and fled. The extremely embarrassed Holy Envoy had just returned to the walled city built by Lin Chen under the protection of Fatty Tutuo. When Lin Chen saw this, he naturally stopped and led his army to slowly fade away. The Holy Envoy, whose face was extremely gloomy, heard the reports of today's losses from his subordinates. The horse army is almost completely lost. Speaking of Ma Jun, the subordinates who reported this couldn't help but be cautious. Infantry, there are tens of thousands, maybe 10,500. That is to say, in this battle, the White Lotus sect lost more than 20,000 troops. Especially the completely lost cavalry army made the Holy Envoy almost faint. You must know that the cost of training a cavalry is enough to support 5 infantry. Thinking of the Holy Envoy here, my heart bleeds. Even the leader will not let him go. The Holy Envoy shuddered, knowing very well that he had only one way to go. That is to atone for one's sins, in order to be dealt with lightly. At the same time, over and over again, Wang Wu cleaned up the battlefield littered with corpses, and at the same time dealt a last blow to the White Lotus soldiers who were still breathing. There are many soldiers like Wang Wu cleaning the battlefield. They gathered the weapons and armor that were still intact, and moved the bodies of both sides to the roadside to pile them up. If it is the corpse of one of our own soldiers, then send it back to the camp and wait for what General Lin will do with it later. As for the corpses of the White Lotus sect thieves, their heads were cut off as a tribute to war, and their bodies were thrown into a pit to be burned. The weather is hot right now, and if the corpses are allowed to rot, diseases will definitely spread. Grown-ups. At this time, Yang Juxing, whose armor was stained with blood, rushed over with a smile on his face that could not be concealed. Because he had previously killed one of the opponent's generals. Afterwards, after questioning the prisoners of the White Lotus sect, I learned that the young general was one of the protectors of the sect and had a high status. At present, Yang Ji ranks first among the generals with this merit. Wei Cheng and others were naturally envious. But Wei Chengjiang also knew it very well. With such a great victory, they would definitely be able to gain a lot of military exploits and feel satisfied. What are the losses of our army? Lin Chen asked without looking back when he heard Yang Ji's movement. The casualties were about 800, 300 were killed in battle, 200 were seriously injured, and the rest were slightly injured. After hearing what Yang Ji said, Lin Chen frowned slightly. Considered seriously injured, his army lost 500 people in this battle. He's still a new recruit after all. Lin Chen couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Logically speaking, this kind of cover-up of a great victory and pursuit should not cause such heavy casualties. Yang Ji didn't know what his general was thinking. If he found out, he would probably start to slander Lin Chen. After all, in his opinion, killing more than 20,000 bandit soldiers with 500 casualties was a great victory. Not to mention, there are thousands of cavalry among them. But Lin Chen thought of another thing. How many war horses were captured this time? You must know that there are not many war horses in Lin Chen's army, and they need to be supplemented and improved. When Yang Ji heard this, his expression became much more excited. A total of 3,000 horses, which can be used with a little training. Yang Ji was a little surprised by this. You must know that the war horses used by these White Lotus sect thieves are not just horses, but a real war horse. There were also a total of 7,000 pieces of iron armor seized, and countless other leather and cotton armors. As the saying goes, throw away the helmet and abandon the armor. The White Lotus cult thieves naturally risked their lives in order to escape. When Lin Chen heard this, a cold look flashed in his eyes, and he immediately headed towards the place where the trophies were piled up. Picking up a piece of armor that was still stained with blood, Lin Chen looked at the markings on the inside of the armor. Laodong supervision. Lin Chen looked at these small official script characters and then put down the armor. A thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. Laodong, Laodong. In this world, the Li and Tang dynasties built the Laodong border defense along the Datong and Jinzhou lines and set up 9 passes in order to prevent the Jurchen tribe from rising outside the Northeast Pass. The permanent governor-general of Laodong commanded 9 passes and hundreds of thousands of border troops. Perhaps due to some kind of historical inertia, the governor of the border army currently guarding the Laodong border is named Zhu Dasho. This man has a nephew. His name is Wu Sangui. There are 30,000 Guaning cavalry in the Laodong frontier army. Are these White Lotus sect thieves also involved with the generals of Laodong? Certainly, Lin Chen could probably imagine the behavior of the generals of the border army based on the style of martial arts in the Beijing camp. These weapons were most likely stolen and sold to the White Lotus sect. This is really... Lin Chen didn't know what to say, so he could only shake his head. The White Lotus sect was well prepared for this uprising. When Lin Chen thought of something, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He had reason to suspect that the White Lotus sect had been planning for this uprising for a long time. Only, what Lin Chen didn't understand was why the White Lotus sect was only operating near Gyeonggi this time instead of spreading in all directions and expanding its scale. Even the Yellow Turban Army knew that it was divided into 36 Fengchu commanders, who led believers in various states and counties to kill officials and rebel. Lin Chen felt that there must be a conspiracy that he didn't know about. But right now he doesn't have many clues and can't figure it out clearly. But, Lin Chen looked at Yang Ji and asked softly, have all the defeated White Lotus sect troops settled in the second camp? Your Majesty, that's right. Ah, Lin Chen's eyes flashed with amusement. For low-level sergeants like Wang Wu, today is a holiday. Horse meat is enough for free. You must know that in this battle, they killed thousands of horses. Although the taste of horse meat is not as smooth as that of beef and mutton, it is a delicacy for ordinary soldiers. And unlimited meat. This is undoubtedly a morale-boosting surprise for the soldiers who have just fought. Is there enough food and grass? Reporting to your lord, the food and grass in the camp can be used by the army for 2 months. In the military tent, all the captains who had won the battle were beaming with joy. Even Mu Guiying, who had been criticizing Lin Chen during this period, sat comfortably on the right side of Lin Chen. Yang Ji, Weikang and others thought that Lin Chen would reward them for their performance today. Without thinking, Lin Chen said with a serious expression, "You will return to camp immediately, select 5,000 elite soldiers, recharge your batteries, and attack tonight." Night attack. When the generals heard this, they couldn't help but take a breath of air. Dare you love your own general? Are you still not satisfied with today's victory? Master Lin, the bandit army may be on guard. After hearing this, Mu Guiying couldn't help but tried to persuade him. After all, they had just suffered a disastrous defeat today. As long as the opponent's general was not a loser, he would know to strictly guard the camp. It doesn't matter. Lin Chen looked indifferent, but there was an inexplicable smile on his lips that no one present could understand. At night, people hold coins in their mouths, and horses chew them in their mouths. Lin Chen looked at the dark, dead night, covered by dark clouds. As the saying goes, the moon is dark and the wind is high at night, it is nothing more than this. These 5,000 selected elites slept all afternoon and were in high spirits. It's weird, I can actually see at night. In ancient times, most ordinary people at the bottom often suffer from night blindness, also known as blindfolded eyes, due to insufficient vitamin intake. Therefore, night raids in ancient times were extremely difficult. There are often cases where a night attack team leaves the stronghold and most of them disperse before they reach the place. But once a night attack is successful, the results can often be astonishing. High investment, high return. Therefore, ancient generals liked to play tricks like night raids. However, tonight, through the faint starlight, these soldiers could actually see the silhouettes of their companions several meters apart. Lin Chen smiled and said nothing when he saw this. This is the reason why the great sergeant is asked to boil pine needle water. You must know that during the period of resisting U.S. aggression and aiding Korea. Likewise, many soldiers suffer from night blindness. When conditions didn't allow it, I was forced to come up with this simple method. It turns out, boiled water with pine needles is useful in treating night blindness. This was one of the reasons why Lin Chen dared to attack at night. Set off. At Lin Chen's order, 5,000 soldiers followed him out of the stronghold. Nature. Lin Chen also arranged for Wei Cheng to stay behind to prevent his home from being stolen. Really, on the wall of the village, there is a sentry every 3 steps, a post every 10 steps, and a small team of patrolling soldiers holding torches. Said without politeness, the White Lotus sect, the commander of the army, was very wary of night attacks. However, Lin Chen's eyes did not waver at all, as if this was all what he expected. Master Lin, the White Lotus sect thieves are on alert. The implication of Mu Guiying's words was to persuade Lin Chen not to take risks. Even if it's a big win during the day. The White Lotus sect's army still has 30,000 to 40,000 people, so we need to take a long-term approach. When Lin Chen heard this, he turned his head and glanced at Mu Guiying, half smiling but not smiling. So, Deputy General Mu doesn't believe that I can succeed in the night attack. Do not believe. Mu Guiying looked at the heavily guarded wall and immediately shook her head. This large army might not be able to reach the wall of the village before they were discovered by the patrolling soldiers. Lin Chen became interested when he saw Mu Guiying shaking her head like a rattle. If I succeed in my night attack, will Vice General Mu be willing to make a bet with someone? What bet? Somehow, Mu Guiying heard Lin Chen's words and asked subconsciously. It's cliché for you and me to use money as a bet, so let's make a promise to the other party. Lin Chen pretended to be disapproving. Do you agree to a condition? Mu Guiying thought about it and felt that this was not a strict bet. Yes, Mu Guiying nodded. High five as an oath. Lin Chen raised his hand naturally, and after Mu Guiying hesitated for a moment, he clapped it. Snapped. The gauntlets collided, making a crisp sound. Then, Under Mu Guiying's surprised gaze, Lin Chen called Yang Ji over and whispered something in his ear. When Yang Ji heard this, his eyes widened with a look of disbelief on his face. I'll go to my humble position right now. Just look at Yang Ji, who took off his armor that was prone to making noise due to collision and was wearing casual clothes as he reached under the wall of the village. It is not difficult for a second-rate warrior to use the cover of night and avoid eyes to reach the wall of the village. Seeing this scene, Mu Guiying frowned and couldn't figure out what kind of medicine Lin Chen was selling in the gourd. Certainly, Mu Guiying soon found out. It turned out that before Lin Chen built this camp, he specially placed a large amount of black powder under the wall at the back end of each camp. He didn't need to attack the camp at all, he could open the door after seizing the wall. Soon, a hurried black shadow ran away from the wall of the village, as if the king of hell was behind him demanding his life. Yang Ji's attitude was naturally something Lin Chen had specially told him. Lin Chen didn't want to blow up his trusted generals into the sky. 1 breath, 3 breaths, 5 breaths. Boom. An earth-shaking explosion echoed in the dead night. Mu Guiying stared dumbfounded at the sudden explosion, and then the wall was thrown into the sky. After the fire, a large hole appeared in the wall of the village. As for the soldiers patrolling the wall, there was no sound. At such a close distance, even if these soldiers were not killed, their internal organs were shattered. Lin Chen patted Mu Guiying on the shoulder. Lieutenant Mu, I won this bet. Lin Chen looked back at Mu Guiying with a smile, and then drew out the sword at his waist. Kill. The 5,000 soldiers just came back to their senses and were shocked that their general could also summon thunder to help. Could it be that my general is a god? Thinking of this, excitement flashed across the faces of these soldiers. Kill. Kill the thief. The holy messenger was also awakened by the deafening explosion. What happened? In the Tongjun military tent, the holy envoy hurriedly asked the guards what happened. Could it be that the earth dragon turned over? Soon, a guard guarding the military tent came in a panic and described the situation. Lord Holy Envoy, officers and soldiers attack at night. What? The holy envoy had a look of disbelief on his face. In order to prevent night attacks by the government troops, he arranged many patrol teams on the city wall. Sir, the wall of the village was blown apart by thunder. My lies are deceiving the public. Hearing the guard's somewhat tearful reply, the holy envoy was so angry that his cheeks were trembling. Certainly, this is not the time to discuss this. The holy envoy knew very well that he needed to immediately arrange soldiers in the stronghold to defend against the enemy. However, what the holy envoy didn't expect was the tragic defeat during the day caused the already nervous soldiers to blow up the camp under the stimulation of the explosion. This situation was not uncommon among ancient armies. In the past, when camp roars occurred in the army, it might even be the scream of someone having a nightmare that could trigger a chain reaction. What made the White Lotus army even worse was the situation. The holy envoy was worried about a night attack, so he ordered the soldiers to sleep with their armor closed and their weapons never leaving their hands. Then, under stress, some soldiers drew their swords and slashed at the figures around them, looking hysterical. Under this situation, the soldiers of the White Lotus priests started fighting each other for no apparent reason. You must know that among these tens of thousands of troops, there are all unfamiliar faces to each other. In addition to the soldiers who bombed the camp, there were also people who regarded their own people who were fighting as enemy troops attacking at night. The holy messenger was dumbfounded. Just look at the sound of fighting in the own camp. On the other hand, the imperial officers and soldiers who attacked at night had just rushed into the camp. It's over. The holy envoy, whose body suddenly went limp, knew that the current situation was no longer something he could restore. He commands an elite army of 60,000 people from the White Lotus sect, as well as 7,000 cavalry. However, all these soldiers and horses were wiped out in one day. The holy messenger laughed miserably. Originally, he was dismissive of the imperial army. Especially the person who leads the army as the commander-in-chief of the 5 cities' army and horses who appears from nowhere. How can such a person compete with himself, a disciple who studies military strategism? But he didn't expect that he would fall into the other party's trap. The holy envoy, who knew that even if he ran away immediately, would only die if he returned to the religion, he suddenly drew his sword. Phew! At the same time, Fat and Thin Tutuo also didn't know what happened, so he hurriedly came to see the holy envoy. But don't want to. Then he saw the holy envoy who had drawn his sword and killed himself, with a splash of blood splattering from his throat. Fat and Thin Tutuo. The two people, who looked at each other speechlessly, let out a long sigh. Senior brother, let's go. Fat Tutuo said to Show Tutuo. The latter nodded helplessly. It is not difficult for these two second-rate warriors to leave. Same. Lin Chen had already led his troops into the camp. His original plan was to set fire to harass, and it would be best to burn the food and grass of the White Lotus sect army. However, Lin Chen was a little surprised when he entered the camp without any obstruction. Soon, Lin Chen and his army looked at the White Lotus priests who were fighting each other and didn't know what to say. Lin Chen's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this. Yang Ji and other captains were immediately ordered to set fire to the soldiers and shout for death, adding fuel to the chaos before them. Really, the soldiers of Yingxiao became more and more crazy. Lin Chen naturally had no intention of letting his sergeants fight to the death with these lunatics. He just asked someone to send a message to Wei Cheng and let him lead the army to the second camp. Just because of now, this is a good opportunity to eat the White Lotus sect army whole. With the arrival of the army, the chaos lasted from late night until dawn. Ruo Yoraowu's moans and screams still echoed in the Nuo camp. These White Lotus sect thieves with bewildered expressions were holding sticky, blood-stained weapons and stared blankly at the imperial officers and soldiers who surrounded them. Yang Ji rode up to these White Lotus sect thieves. Hey, if you put down your weapons, there is still a way to survive. If not, we will kill without mercy. Aha! Following Yang Ji's words, the archer behind him held an arrow in his hand and would pull the string and release the arrow with just a command. These exhausted White Lotus soldiers just subconsciously dropped their weapons and knelt down to beg for surrender. My lord, what a great victory! Wei Cheng came to Lin Chen excitedly, his tone extremely joyful. Lin Chen also had a hint of joy in his heart. He originally only planned to harass the White Lotus sect army at night. But he didn't expect these White Lotus priests to roar. Lin Chen also found the body of the so-called holy messenger, who committed suicide. When Lin Chen saw the other party's body, he understood clearly. If the holy envoy had intervened to stop the camp roar as soon as it happened, the chaos would never have been so big last night. Where is Vice General Mu? Lin Chen seemed to have thought of something and asked about Mu Guiying's whereabouts. Here, Master Mu is gathering the prisoners. How many prisoners are there? Hearing this, Wei Cheng lowered his voice and said, about 30,000 people. That is to say, last night, the White Lotus sect thieves killed and injured tens of thousands of people just due to civil strife. Lin Chen was speechless. No wonder the ancient military camps had 7 laws and 14 cuts. According to the military regulations, if soldiers make noise at night, it is a serious crime that will result in beheading. It was obviously a rule made to prevent Yingxiao. This shows the taboo against Yingxiao in ancient times. Sir, these prisoners. Seeing that Lin Chen was silent, Wei Cheng thought that his master had other thoughts, so he immediately made a chopping gesture on his neck. Lin Chen came to his senses after hearing this and turned to look at Wei Cheng. The latter was stared at by Lin Chen in a daze. He naturally understood the meaning of Wei Cheng's words. That is to trap and kill these 30,000 White Lotus sect prisoners. You must know that Lin Chen only has 20,000 troops in his hands, so he cannot distract himself from taking care of these prisoners. Moreover, if there are interested people among the prisoners who intend to cause trouble, it will only cause trouble. Wei Cheng, I'm here. Wei Cheng quickly bowed his head and said yes. You ask the White Lotus prisoners to identify the generals who have more than 100 generals. The rest of the soldiers will be spared their lives, and the rest will be killed without mercy. No matter what, these White Lotus priests are all rebels. If placed in any ancient court, it would be a serious crime to punish the 9 clan. Lin Chen couldn't kill 30,000 people in one go, but he couldn't keep these middle and high-level officers in the White Lotus sect's army. Without these officers making noise and causing trouble, the rest of the White Lotus sect's ordinary soldiers only needed to disrupt the team and escort them back to the capital. Yes, Wei Cheng heard Lin Chen's arrangement and immediately went to carry it out. While Lin Chen was dealing with these trivial matters, Mu Guiying was also busy writing secret notes to His Majesty the Emperor. She was arranged by Li Jiao to serve as deputy general in the army, not only to protect Lin Chen, but also to report on the situation of the army. Lin Chenjia uses his troops like a god. He can be called the leader of Korea and Korea. Yinglian is ashamed of herself. In just 3 days, 60,000 elite traders from the White Lotus sect were defeated by General Lin. More than 20,000 were beheaded, 30,000 were surrendered and captured, and there were countless soldiers and banners. Among Mu Guiying's secrets, she reported everything that happened during this period to Li Jiao. Especially for Lin Chen, he was praised to the heavens and directly put Lin Chen on the same level as the soldier immortal Han Xin and Zhang Liang. Certainly, this is definitely Mu Guiying's subjective opinion, but it also shows Mu Guiying's high regard for Lin Chen. Because the methods used by Lin Chen were something she had never seen in military books. Same, Mu Guiying was deeply impressed by Lin Chen's Divine Machine Battalion. She knew very well that there was no so-called matchlock gun among Li Tang's current standard weapons. There was only one possibility, which was designed and built by Lin Chen himself. Master Mu, General Lin has summoned you to the big tent to discuss matters. At this time, a respectful message sounded outside the tent. When Mu Guiying heard this, he immediately put the secret document he had written on it and prepared to arrange for his cronies to be sent to the capital. After delivering the secret fold, Mu Guiying hurriedly came to the tent. I saw that the big tent was overcrowded, and many generals were whispering to each other and discussing this great victory in low voices. I can tell, for these generals, what they saw in the past few days was extremely shocking. Lin Chen walked into the tent. For the next second, there was silence. General Lin. Everyone present bowed their hands and saluted with respectful tone and a look of awe on their faces. When Lin Chen saw this, he shook his head imperceptibly and waved for these guys to get up. Next, he wanted to plan the army's next move. Arrange 5,000 sergeants to escort the prisoners back to Beijing. This is the first step. Lin Chen did not have the energy to worry about these prisoners at the moment, so he escorted them back to the capital and let the emperor himself handle them. Furthermore, for a big victory, Lin Chen also had to ask for credit from his military academy. The 4 counties closest to us are now being harassed by White Lotus sect thieves. As Lin Chen spoke, he called out the names of Yangji, Weikeng and several other captains. The humble position is here. You and your team will lead your subordinates to eliminate these White Lotus sect thieves and protect the country and the people. Yes. Immediately, the army moved its camp and headed to Pangu County to rest and recuperate. Pangu County is the county town that was unable to be conquered by the leader of the White Lotus sect led by 10,000 people for a long time. At the same time, Pangu County government. Master Pan. A government official rushed into the county government office to report the situation. How unbecoming, you were in a panic. The man known as Master Pan scolded. The Yamen servant was obedient, bowed his head and said nothing. At this time, Master Pan was entertaining guests. He raised his glass and said gratefully, "Thank you, Master Yu, for your help during this time. If Head Yu hadn't taken action, Pangu County would have been in danger." "What are you talking about? How can I, Yu Bukchun, sit idly by when the people are in trouble?" Yu Bukchun said with a serious face. "Master Yu is so righteous, no wonder he is called the gentleman's sword." Lord Pan couldn't help but nodded, and he had a better impression of the upright leader of the Washan sect in front of him. Before, he didn't have a good impression of these martial arts people who were high and mighty and would draw swords to kill people whenever they disagreed. This gentleman's sword is not only powerful in martial arts, but also has extraordinary conversational skills. Thinking of this, Panji had a real smile on his face. You must know that Pangu County has a population of only 30,000 households and is a middle county. The White Lotus sect that had previously besieged the county seat numbered tens of thousands, and the county capital was once again useless. If he hadn't built water conservancy projects and developed culture and education during his 2 years in office, he would have had a somewhat good reputation among the people. With the help of Yu Bukchun and his disciples, they were able to block the White Lotus sect's attack. Such thoughts flashed through Panji's mind, and then he looked at the Yamen servant with a slight frown and asked, "What's the matter?" "Master Pan, the army sent by the imperial court has arrived at the city." "What?" When Panji heard this, he stood up suddenly. his face changed slightly, and he paced back and forth. Didn't the Imperial Army just be repelled by the White Lotus cult thieves yesterday? Pangu naturally saw everything that happened yesterday. Especially those elite troops of the White Lotus sect lurking in the dark made him break out in cold sweat. Just talking about yesterday's battle, it was lucky that all the Imperial Army was able to retreat. Now the officer told him that the Imperial Army had arrived at the city. Could it be that the Imperial Army defeated tens of thousands of White Lotus sect's elite soldiers overnight? Pangu suddenly felt it was impossible. Could it be that the White Lotus cult thieves were pretending to be Imperial officers and soldiers to trick me into opening the city gate on purpose? This thought flashed through Pangu's mind, but he immediately denied it. If the White Lotus sect army really defeated the Imperial officers and soldiers, why would they use this method to deceive the city gate? If the army directly pressed forward, it would be impossible for Pangu County, whose city wall was only 3 meters tall, to stop them. Yu Bukchun also heard the news that the Imperial Army had arrived at the city, and saw why Pangu hesitated. Master Pan, let's go to the top of the city and take a look. Maybe the Imperial Army is really here. That's fine. Seeing that Yu Bukchun had said so, Pangu could only smile bitterly and nod. But how about asking Master Yu to come with me? When Yu Bukchun heard this, he was quite speechless, but he didn't show it on his face and nodded with a smile. Lin Chen looked at the frightened civilian guards on the wall with a calm expression. On the other hand, warriors like Yang Ji couldn't bear it any longer. You haven't opened the city gate yet. Here, this general, I have ordered someone to report to the county magistrate. Only after he comes can we start. Before the guard could finish his trembling words, the anger on Yang Ji's face became more and more obvious, and he was about to curse angrily. He and his team destroyed the White Lotus sect army, but now they have to be exposed to the scorching sun at noon. Sir, this Pangu County official is so ignorant. Wei Cheng then rode forward and muttered in Lin Chen's ear. Obviously, he and Yang Ji were in similar moods. Fortunately, at this time, the policemen on the city seemed to have a backbone and calmed down. Just look at a county magistrate in green wearing the uniform of a 7th grade official walking up to the city. Lin Chen narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the county magistrate, who was about 30 years old. Who is under the city? Pan Zhizhuang shouted with courage, and at the same time he glanced at the neat soldiers below, feeling secretly shocked. Yang Zigang wanted to have a fit, but was stopped by Lin Chen. A certain family is specially sent by His Majesty to fight against the rebel general, Lin Chenjia. Lin Chen said with a smile, Master Yu, I didn't expect to meet here again. When Yu Bukchun heard the voice, a flash of astonishment flashed in his eyes, and then he realized that the voice was very familiar. Is it Lin Dutong? Yu Bukchun asked tentatively. Exactly down there. Lord Pan, please open the city gate. The leading general is an old acquaintance of Yu's. Yu Bukchun didn't expect it either. Lin Chenjia, the commander of the 5 cities' soldiers and horses, who we met once in the capital, suddenly turned into a general commanding tens of thousands of troops. Pangu was startled when he heard this. Naturally, he believed Yu Bukchun's words and immediately called the guards to open the door. HMPH. Yang Ji looked at Pangu and snorted coldly. Seeing this, Lin Chen ordered, the army has entered the city and passed on. Anyone who harasses the people or violates military discipline will be severely punished. The people of Pangu County, who had been besieged by the White Lotus sect for a long time, couldn't help but cautiously look outside through the cracks in the windows after learning that the Imperial Army was coming. General Lin. At this time, Pangu walked down the city wall and came to Lin Chen's horse and bowed in salute. Pangu, the magistrate of Sha Pangu County, was responsible for his previous duties, so don't be surprised. Lin Chen looked at the county magistrate in front of him with interest. Nothing. Lin Chen didn't care enough about this kind of thing. Then, Lin Chen looked at Yu Bukchun and bowed his hands towards him. Master Yu, why are you here? Lin Chen could remember that the other party left the capital many days before him and why he was in Pangu County. When Yu Bukchun saw Lin Chen asking about this matter, a look of helplessness appeared on his face. Yu is troubled by General Lin's thoughts. Yu Bukchun talked about why he was here. It turned out that Yu Bukchun led the Washan disciples to leave the capital. While walking, they unexpectedly encountered the White Lotus rebellion. Yu Bukchun, who was afraid of being implicated, could only walk back. Who would have thought that the White Lotus sect was so powerful that it forced the White Lotus sect to wander around and settle down in Pangu County? The next step is to help Pangu County resist the rebel army. Hearing this, Lin Chen nodded thoughtfully, thought of something, and asked with a chuckle. By the way, Master Yu, do you still remember Lin Pingji? When Yu Bukchun heard this, his heart moved slightly. Is Pingji also in General Lin's army? Of course, I'll let him come to see Master Yu later. After saying that, Lin Chen slightly cupped his hands and said, General, I still have military affairs to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. General Lin, walk slowly. Panji and Yu Bukchun watched Lin Chen leave with different colors in their eyes. Panji was the first to express surprise. These soldiers under General Lin are actually mighty troops. After all, soldiers who enter the city without disturbing the people are rare in Panji's opinion. This shows that Lin Chenjia has a good command of the army. Yu Buchan's eyes flickered, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Then, he excuses himself to say goodbye to Panji. The disciples of Washan sect all live in inns in the county. The people in the county who were originally panic-stricken finally dared to leave their homes after the army entered the city. Senior brother. Ning Zhang saw her husband coming back and shouted immediately. Yu Bukchun chuckled and nodded, and then told everyone present a piece of breaking news. Junior sister, you have seen the person who led the imperial army to put down the rebellion this time. Oh, Ning Zong's naturally heard about the arrival of the imperial army in Pangu County. Who is it? It was Lin Dutong and Lin Chenjia whom we met at Saidong Chamber of Commerce that day. Father, who do you think you are? Yu Lingshan, who was dressing the wound of a Washan sect disciple, brightened up when she heard this. Hiss. The unlucky Washan sect disciple felt his wound being pulled hard by the bandage, and he almost died from the pain. Lingshan. Seeing this, Yu Bukchun became so angry that he scolded her with a straight face. Yu Lingshan smiled awkwardly and stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. And the Pingji we rescued earlier was also in Lin Dutong's army. For Ning Zong's, Lin Pingji had a very good impression on her. As for Lin Pingji, who was missed by Yu Bukchun, he was writing letters home with his soldiers. General Lin Bai, your handwriting is so beautiful, a young soldier said with respect. Lin Pingji also practiced martial arts since he was a child. After joining the Wucheng Army and Horses Division, he was selected as a 100-man general. Originally, these vulgar men did not think highly of Lin Pingji, a pretty boy. But for now, Lin Pingji has obviously gained the respect of his soldiers. General Lin Bai, General Lin is calling you to go to the military tent. At this time, someone reported it. Lin Pingji put down the soldier's family letter he had just written, with a look of surprise on his face. General, what do you want with me? I don't know. The person shook his head. Not long after, Lin Pingji came to the side hall. Pingji, you have suffered a lot during this time. Ning Zong's had a look of distress on his eyebrows. Lin Ping was originally a young master from a wealthy family, and he was used to being pampered and pampered. After rescuing the boy that day, she had a very good impression of him. Goodbye today. This rich young man has tanned a bit, and the weak temperament in his body has been worn away in the military, replaced by a trace of vigor. Master Yu, Mrs. Ning. No matter how, it was the two people in front of him who saved his life. Lin Pingji bowed as a junior. Without darkening, he is still a young man with a clear distinction between love and hate. Yu Bukchun looked at Lin Pingji in front of him. No matter what he thought in his heart, he had an expression of relief on his face and asked, Pingji, I heard that you are now serving under Lin Dutong. Yes. When Lin Pingji saw Yu Bukchun mentioning Lin Chen, a hint of awe flashed in his eyes. At the beginning, he really wanted to use Lin Chen's power to avoid those young people who were spying on the Lin family's evil sword skills. But Lin Pingji, who had stayed under Lin Chen's command for a long time, finally understood how extraordinary this General Lin was. Come closer. The 60,000 elite troops of the White Lotus sect thieves were destroyed in Lin Chen's hands overnight. As a low-level general, Lin Pingji didn't even know what was happening. All I know is that when I wake up one night, the whole army will be victorious. So, Lin Ping subconsciously brought the topic to Lin Chen. Yu Bukchun was also wondering about the details of yesterday's fight. However, When Lin Pingji talked about Lin Chen's defeat of the White Lotus sect army in one night, the Washan sect disciples in the inn were dumbfounded. This General Lin, is his military strategy so powerful? I saw the mighty force of the White Lotus sect army on the city wall that day, but I didn't want to be defeated so quickly. The Washan school disciples whispered in admiration, and even Yu Bukchun couldn't help but feel a little moved in his eyes. So Lin Pingji, have you seen the true face of General Lin under the mask? At this moment, a delicate female voice sounded as clear as an oriole. The questioner was none other than Lin Chen, a junior sister from Washan. Lin Pingji's face stiffened slightly when he heard this. He was a low-level general who had no contact with Lin Chen on weekdays. How could he have the chance to see his true appearance? But Lin Pingji thought about it for a moment and said loudly, I think the general is as handsome and elegant as King Lanaling. I was afraid that he would not be able to frighten the general, so I showed him his ghost face. Finished. Lin Pingji suddenly felt a little cold behind his back and subconsciously turned his head to look. Hiss. Lin Pingji subconsciously shrank his neck when he saw that familiar figure. After thinking of something, he straightened his back. I wasn't speaking ill of Lin Chen, so why did I feel guilty? Lin Chen. General Lin. After Lin Chen saw Lin Chen's figure, her big black eyes lit up and she waved hello. Lin Chen nodded politely to Lin Chen, then looked at Yu Bukchun. Master Yu, I heard from County Magistrate Pan that the Washan disciples have made great contributions in defending the city during this period. I will ask your majesty to report the achievements of the Washan sect later. Although the imperial court did not interfere much in Zhonghu affairs, most of the orthodox disciples had a friendly attitude towards the imperial court. Only the disciples of the demon sect did not take the imperial court seriously, but they did not dare to openly kill officials and cause chaos. At present, Li Tang still has some power left. Thank you, General Lin. Yu Bukchun said seriously. As the saying goes, everyone carries the sedan chair, and asking for merit is nothing more than a monetary reward. But it can boost the Washan sect's reputation in the world. By the way, Master Yu. Lin Chen seemed to have thought of something and asked about the situation of the White Lotus sect in the capitals of Gyeonggi province. Nature. Lin Chen didn't just come to Yu Bukchun because he was bored. The other party retreated all the way to Pangu County, and what they saw and heard on the way was quite helpful to Lin Chen. Yu Bukchun understood the meaning of Lin Chen's words and did not hide it. He immediately talked about what he had seen in Gyeonggi during this period. The White Lotus sect, for those who join it, are collectively called believers. Wherever they go, they kill and plunder county government officials and extort wealthy businessmen and landlords. If they don't follow, they will directly slaughter the whole family. Yu Bukchun said, with a trace of lingering fear on his face. Color. This was the first time he had seen such brutal methods. No wonder the ancients said that it is better to be a peace dog than a person in troubled times. Besides, you heard that among the White Lotus sect, there are 24 Dharma protectors, 10 dwelling bodhisattvas, and a leader who secretly gives orders. When Lin Chen heard this, his eyes narrowed slightly. Dharma protector. Yongji killed a young protector. Another White Lotus sect protector died in the civil strife last night. One was captured alive and later beheaded. As for the so-called 10 abode bodhisattva, Lin Chen knew a little bit about it. The White Lotus sect, a religion that specializes in rebellion, has developed and absorbed many religions that started as rebels. Among them is the Maitreya religion. This Maitreya religion started in the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, and started with the slogan of killing people to become Buddhas. Kill one person to become a bodhisattva, kill 10 people to become a bodhisattva of 10 abodes. Therefore, Lin Chen was not surprised at all that there was such a thing in the White Lotus sect. Not to mention the world of Li Tang in this mixed martial arts background. This 10 abode bodhisattva must be a good fighter among warriors. After Lin Chen found out that he wanted information, he stood up and left. Yu Bukchun stood up to see him off. By the way, Master Yu. Lin Chen paused in his steps, as if he inadvertently mentioned the sword manual to ward off evil spirits. After I heard about the murder of the Lin family, I also asked someone to investigate the origins of the Lin family. Did you know that the evil dispelling sword manual was originally a simplified version of the great secret book, the Sunflower Book? Yu Bukchun was startled when he heard this. He knew that this evil fighting sword manual originated from the Sunflower Book, but he didn't know that the Sunflower Book was a secret book in the Imperial Palace. When Lin Chen talked about this matter, he naturally asked the other party to stop having Lin Pingji's ideas. Right now, he is short of people. At this time, you really didn't know. Yu Bukchun, with an inexplicable look in his eyes, was thinking about why Lin Chen wanted to talk about this matter. Could it be that you were beating him? Yu Buchan's heart trembled when he thought of the key point. But he reacted immediately. Even Ning Zong's, the person next to him, didn't know about his plot to ward off evil spirits. How did the person in front of me know that? Lin Chen seemed not to notice Yu Buchan's expression, and said enthusiastically, but if you want to practice this Sunflower Book or this evil fighting sword manual, you must complete one thing. What's the matter? Yu Bukchun asked blurtly. This Sunflower Manual was created by eunuchs. If a normal man practices it, the technique will not work well, resulting in imbalance of yin and yang. It is very likely that the internal energy will be chaotic and cause sudden death. So if you want to practice, you need to go to the palace. After hearing what Lin Chen said, Yu Buchan's expression froze. From the palace, but the ancestor of the Lin family, is it too? Ning Zhong also heard Lin Chen's words and said in shock. Fortunately, I reacted and didn't finish the next word. After all, there was a person involved present. But Lin Pingji had learned the news from Lin Chen before, so the expression on his face didn't change much at this time. Master Yu, I won't send it away. Really. After Lin Chen finished explaining the prerequisites for practicing the evil repelling sword manual, Yu Buchan's upright and serious old face almost became tense. This was the first time he had heard someone talk about such a secret. Lin Chen estimated that now Yu Bukchun would not be trying his best to devise sword recipes to ward off evil spirits. In this world of comprehensive martial arts, there are many profound martial arts secrets left in the world. Furthermore, the Five Mountains Alliance must rely on alliances to protect itself in such a vast world. Therefore, there is no situation in the book where Zuo Lengchen takes the position of leader of the martial arts alliance to suppress the other four sects in order for the Songshan sect to dominate the world. On the contrary, the Wuyu sect appears to be on the same page and has a very good relationship. This allows the Five Mountains Alliance to be called a first-rate force among Zhonghu sects. In Lin Chen's view, in this world, Yu Bukchun probably wants to revitalize the Washan sect. It is best to take back the Washan sect's leadership position in the Five Mountains Alliance from the Songshan sect. Of course, these have nothing to do with Lin Chen. Peaceful scenes have returned to the streets of Pangu County. These low-level people who are struggling to survive have already exhausted their energy just to survive. What's the price of food? 400 coins for miscellaneous grains, and 1 stone for polished rice. Lin Chen's eyes turned cold after hearing what the waiter at the grain store said. It had been so long since he had taken action against profiteers and evil businessmen that he had almost forgotten the traditional skills of confiscating homes. Lord Pan, Magistrate Pan, please save me. Pangu County finally got out of the siege, but Panji had no time to rest for a while and had to find a way to restore people's livelihood. For now, Panji is a good official. Panji was surprised when he heard these squires and merchants complaining about injustice. In the past, these local snakes didn't have a good look on him as the county magistrate, and they were condescending to him. Why did you come to him today to seek help? Panji thought of something, but did not go to see these people immediately, but let them fidget in the front hall. Panji, a close government official, was summoned and asked to go to the streets to find out the reason. Soon, the officer is back. Master Pan, that General Lin is inspecting the grain dealers and saying that these guys are driving up prices. He is very cruel. The Yamen officer looked delighted. His daily salary is not much, and it is difficult to support his family. Not to mention that prices in Pangu County have skyrocketed during this period. Now that someone is out to deal with these profiteers, he can't wait to applaud. Panji also had a normal expression. Good. He had long wanted to attack these merchants, but behind them were local gentry, and Panji, the county magistrate, had trouble speaking. Never thought about it. These local snakes encountered a dragon crossing the river. Especially the dragon crossing the river still holds a weapon in his hand and doesn't care at all about a few more dead souls. Therefore, Panji planned to pretend to be dead. Everyone, Mr. Pan caught wind and cold last night and is seriously ill now. Please come back in a few days. The official came to inform these wealthy gentry. The wealthy gentlemen, each wearing long silk satin and with round bodies, looked at each other in confusion. What should we do? Soon after Lin Chen arranged for soldiers to raid the grain store, grain prices in Pangu County returned to normal. Lin Chen dared to attack those grain merchants with monstrous backgrounds in the capital, let alone these country squires. The scar is healed and the pain is forgotten. You must know that it was these desperate people that caused the White Lotus rebellion. When a person is about to starve to death, he can do anything. Naturally, Lin Chen didn't want to see the White Lotus sect that he had suppressed, because this group of squire and landlords who were unjust for their profit had resurrected. He has arranged for Yang Ji, Wei Cheng and others to lead a large army, starting from Pangu County, to quell the White Lotus sect rebellion in various places. The White Lotus sect lost 60,000 elites in one day, and it seems that the other party will not dare to make any changes in the near future. Therefore, Lin Chen needed to seize the time to train. These White Lotus sect rebels who are causing trouble in the countryside have become the best training targets. At the same time, the news that Lin Chen led an army to annihilate the 60,000 White Lotus sect army spread like the wind in the capital. How many days has it been? Especially after the White Lotus sect prisoners and their heads and banners were sent to the capital as gifts. No one doubted that this was Lin Chen's false report of military exploits. The people in the capital who were originally worried about the White Lotus sect were immediately relieved. With General Lin here, the White Lotus sect's thieves are nothing more than chusakata, and they won't be able to jump around for a few days. Click. The precious official kiln porcelain was thrown to the ground by Zhao Guangyi and smashed. Trash, these trash from the White Lotus sect. He never expected that he would secretly give the White Lotus sect so much support, soldiers, food and even detailed information about Lin Chenjia's army. Even so, the 60,000 elites gathered by the White Lotus sect were all eaten by Lin Chen in one bite. To say these guys are trash is an overstatement. The black-robed man kneeling on the ground was shivering and could only let Zhao Guangyi calm down before talking. Zhao Erlang, my leader doesn't know what's going on. Zhao Guangyi laughed angrily when he heard this. The army was destroyed, and you don't even know what happened. When the man in black robe saw this, he stopped talking. Explain. My leader has a handwritten copy for Minister Zhao. Zhao Guangyi was unhappy when he heard this. Can't it be given to a certain family? The man in black robe hesitated. A certain brother has gone to court, please wait. When Zhao Guangyi saw that the other party did not let go, he threw up his sleeves and left with a dark face. It seemed that everyone only knew his eldest brother Zhao Guangyan. Speaking of him, Zhao Guangyi, he would only be called the second brother Zhao Guangyan. Thinking of this, Zhao Guangyi couldn't help but clenched his fists. Above the court, many ministers had different expressions. From the appearance of these people, it is enough to tell which sect they belong to. For example, most of the ministers of Zhao Guangyan's faction forced themselves to smile. The ministers from He Shen's group watched the fun. A few ministers from other factions, or Qingliu, were delighted. Indeed, Lin Chen can fight, which is a good thing for them. Even Li Zhao had a hint of joy on his face. Qing Zhao, based on what you see, is this battle report trustworthy? Li Zhao's eyes fell firmly on Zhao Guangyan. The latter lowered his head and said respectfully, Your Majesty, General Lin is an unparalleled general, and I am not as good as me. This battle report is very credible. Nonsense. The prisoners also had flags, leaving no basis for any suspicion. Ha ha ha. Li Zhao heard this and laughed heartily. As an emperor, he should keep his emotions in check. However, during this period, Li Zhao was feeling very angry, and he had unbearable pain in his lower abdomen for the past 2 days. Li Zhao couldn't help but come forward to beat Zhao Guangyan at this time. In this case, Lin Chenjia and his soldiers should be rewarded. Preach my will. Lin Chenjia was promoted to the imperial envoy to quell the rebellion and to serve as the general to fight against rebellion. He was rewarded with the emperor's sword. Officials from various prefectures in the capital should fully cooperate. According to the order, at present, no one with discernment will jump out and disobey Li Zhao's wishes. Zhao Guangyan lowered his head, his dark face becoming more solemn. Who would have thought that a fledgling commander-in-chief of the 5 cities army and horses division would actually have the talents of Han and Zhang? Xiao Jiaozi, why are you so restless today? In the side hall of Sinning Palace, a palace maid looked at the eunuch guarding the door and couldn't help scolding him. After hearing this, Xiao Jiao came back to his senses. Xiao Jiao, who pretended to be frightened and apologized to the palace maid, sent her away. Looking at the other person's leaving figure, Xiao Jiao began to curse a certain guy in his heart. This guy won't come to see me even once in such a long time, and he asked me to come to the Queen Mother's palace to check the gate. I'm so angry. Xiao Jiao, who was stomping his feet and sulking, pouted his cheeks. Nature. The person Xiao Jiao talked about was Lin Chen. Little did he know that Lin Chen was already hundreds of miles away in Pangu County and no longer in the palace. In the letter Lin Chen left for Xiao Jiao, he only wrote that he had something to do and might not come back for several months. At the same time, Xiao Jiao was asked to find Hai Dafu and use his connections to sneak into the side hall of Sinning Palace and work as a little eunuch. In name, he was a caretaker, but in reality, Lin Chen asked Xiao Jiao to take care of the real Queen Mother, Kai Wenji. After all, among the women who had a relationship with Lin Chen, Wenji was the only one who fell in love with her. In the side hall, Wenji looked at her growing belly, a trace of sadness appeared on her beautiful face. Thanks to the fake Queen Mother who stopped interfering in her own affairs, she didn't find out that she was pregnant. But what will happen in a few months when it's time to give birth? Alas, in the side hall, the beauty side, Beijing, Saidong Chamber of Commerce. Oh, Zhao Min became interested after hearing the report from his subordinates. This Lin Chenjia is actually so capable. Zhao Min also learned about Lin Chen's annihilation of the White Lotus sect's army. In that case, Zhao Min played with the folding fan in his hand, a thoughtful look on his face. Originally I just thought that the other party was just a martial artist. Although she had entered the acquired realm, with her intelligence, it was easy to figure it out. But I didn't expect that the other party was still a general. She immediately called her subordinates and whispered a few words into their ears. Same day, Princess Duanwang left the city in the name of spring outing. This little thing didn't attract much attention. Here in Gyeonggi Province. Originally, the White Lotus sect captured the 13 counties in the 4 prefectures of Gyeonggi Province. However, after the First World War in Pangu County, the White Lotus sect also realized that it had suffered heavy losses and began to gather its followers and lick its wounds. Lin Chen naturally couldn't let go of such a great opportunity and started to clean up the surrounding White Lotus cult thieves. In just half a month, Lin Chen gathered together 1 prefecture and 4 counties in Gyeonggi Province. Chenliu Chikang. The Imperial Army stationed troops here. At present, Lin Chen's troops have expanded from the more than 20,000 who just left Beijing to 30,000. In successive battles, it is impossible for the army to suffer no losses at all. There were nearly 2,000 casualties. However, these casualties resulted in the transformation of these soldiers. Naturally, Lin Chen also recruited new soldiers from the refugees as supplements. Grown-ups. Suddenly, Yang Juxing rushed in from outside the military tent, then half-kneeled and saluted. Lin Chen slowly raised his head, put down the map information in his hand, and turned his gaze to Yang Ji. Yang Ji was about to speak, but when he saw the murderous gaze of the maid in red palace clothes kneeling next to Lin Chen, his body trembled subconsciously. This rather familiar aura made Yang Ji suddenly realize who this woman was. It was none other than Lieutenant General Mu. Although he knew that Vice Admiral Mu was a woman, she always wore armor and had a ghost face, so ordinary people couldn't see what she looked like. Over time, Yang Ji almost forgot about the other party's daughter. However, seeing the other person change his clothes now, he was actually a little surprised. Certainly, Yang Ji didn't dare to look further, for fear that Mu Guiying would come to trouble him later. He couldn't defeat this violent woman. This also made Yang Ji admire his general even more. Although he didn't know how Lin Chen made Vice General Mu, who had a fierce personality like a horse, put on a maid's uniform and serve him. Fortunately, he did not forget the purpose of his coming, and immediately said loudly, "Sir, a brother from a certain family has come to join the army." Lin Chen raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard this. Yang Ji had told Lin Chen about his brothers from the same race before. According to Yang Ji, these brothers are no worse than him in ability, and even far better than him in military strategy. Outside the military camp, 3 young men dressed as warriors were whispering to each other. The older man held a gun and a bow, with a mature and upright face. Third brother, look at the arrangement of this military camp, the person who leads the army is not a loser. The young man with the most immature face said excitedly. Seventh brother, my father was not willing to let you come in the first place, why should you? Fifth brother, you all come out to do big things, how boring is it to leave me here in Yangjia village? The young man who was called fifth brother had a look of helplessness on his face. If you find it boring, why don't you stay in the village? Haha, my eighth brother is only 14 years old this year. He wants to go out but is unable to do so. The boy, who looked only 16 years old, said with a smile. Seventh brother, if the general comes out later, please don't smile playfully. We are here to surrender to the army. Hey, third brother, you've said it 800 times all the way, I know. The 3 brothers continued chatting without waiting. The gate of the military camp suddenly opened, and a line of generals came out on horseback, and the leader was Lin Chen. The 3 young brothers looked at the general who had a calm figure and a certain aura of self-indulgence and self-anger, and the expressions on their faces became more serious. Immediately stand up and dismount. Yang Xuan pays homage to General Lin. Yang Chun has met the general. A certain Yang Shi has met General Lin. Lin Chen looked at the 3 brothers with different temperaments in front of him, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. As early as when Yang Ji recommended his brothers to him, Lin Chen had made assumptions about these young brothers. After all, he already has Mu Guiying, so it wouldn't be surprising to have another Yang family general. These 3 people are none other than others. They are Yang Jiasanlang, Yang Jiawulong and Yang Jiaqilang. Lin Chen's 6 senses swept over the 3 people and nodded incomprehensibly. They are all in the realm of second-rate warriors. Yang Wulong felt something and subconsciously looked at Lin Chen. Oh, Lin Chen looked at the other party with interest. After all, it was the person who converted to Buddhism and finally created the Wulong Bagua stick who actually noticed Lin Chen's 6 senses. Not bad. Lin Chen nodded slightly and said. Yang Ji told me about the Yang brothers. It is indeed extraordinary to see them today. Hearing Lin Chen's admiring praise, Yang Qilang's eyes showed a hint of surprise, and he had a good impression of this general he had never met before. At least this general is not like those idiot generals who like to look at people with their heads high. The general is ridiculous. This Yang Sanlang was more mature and said modestly. Yang Wulong was not a good talker and kept silent. Now that you are here for the first time, although I think you have some courage and ability, in the army, officers are awarded based on merit and it is not easy to promote them at will. So, what do you 3 brothers do in Yangjijun? If you have merit, you will be promoted. How about it? Lin Chen had already made plans in his mind for the 3 of them to stay or go. Never thought. General Lin, if that's the case, we won't have to do anything special, just be a pawn under your command. Yang Qilang is a young man after all, and he is full of energy. Shichiro. When Yang Sanlang heard this, he couldn't help scolding his younger brother. Ha ha, Lin Chen laughed. It's okay. Although it's a little more dangerous to be around me, the merits are the most outstanding. You 3 brothers will be my personal guards for the time being. Yang Sanlang was startled when he heard this, and then felt slightly happy. You must know that the personal guards, as the general's close associates, are not only the easiest to get credit for, but their status is not comparable. Fortunately, the general in front of him didn't pursue his brother's offense at all, but looked at him very much. Thank you, General. Lin Chen nodded silently and allowed the 3 of them to enter the camp. Although the 3 young brothers had a family tradition of martial arts, this was their first time to visit the military camp in person, and they couldn't help but look around curiously. Yang Ji, please arrange for your cousin to enter the camp and prepare armor and clothes for him. Yes. Yang Ji heard this and nodded quickly. He also had a lot of things he wanted to talk to the 3 brothers. For example, how is Yang Jiakyun doing now, and how are his relatives at home? Although there are only 3 Yang family generals, for Lin Chen, it has greatly alleviated the talent pressure. At present, the high-ranking generals in the army are all the guards of the prince's mansion who followed Lin Chen to serve as the 5 cities soldiers and horses division. In Lin Chen's opinion, these people could only be said to be useful. Among them, Wei Cheng can be regarded as the one who takes the lead. As for the others, they most serve as commanders. Letting these people control 2,000 or 3,000 people is an expedient measure. When Lin Chen returned to the military formation, he saw Mu Guiying, who felt uncomfortable all over, pulling at the front of her clothes and muttering something like it was too tight and not as comfortable as military uniforms. By chance, Lin Chen was surprised when he looked at the fair and round figure emerging from the palace attire. I didn't expect to see Mu Guiying's straight body in the past, but I didn't expect it to be so unexpected. Mu Guiying and Lin Chen looked at each other, but they didn't scream as Lin Chen thought. Instead, they covered their bodies and turned their backs. This made Lin Chen raise his eyebrows. This girl is used to being carefree, but she is not as desperate as an ordinary woman. Of course, ordinary women would not be able to pull up their clothes in a military tent. Mu Guiying didn't know what Lin Chen thought about her. If Lin Chen looked at Mu Guiying's shy ruby-red earlobes at this moment, he would know that his mood was not as plain as he had just revealed. Or, Mu Guiying just didn't have a clear mind. When she reacted, she realized what she had done. She was spotted by a man. If I had known better, I shouldn't have agreed to the bet. Mu Guiying couldn't help but feel regretful about making the bet with Lin Chen. Now wearing a red palace dress and acting as a maid beside Lin Chen, this was the content of the bet that Lin Chen wanted Mu Guiying to complete. Lin Chen just wanted to see what Mu Guiying, who was accustomed to wearing military uniforms, would look like in a women's womb dress. All I can say is, it's amazing. Although he is not as fair-skinned as Xiao Zhao, he has a tall figure and well-proportioned lines due to his years of martial arts practice. Lin Chen was in for a treat anyway. Mu Guiying, who finally suppressed the shame and anger in her heart, turned around and started doing it. Seeing that Lin Chen was still looking at him, with thoughts flashing in his eyes from time to time, he asked angrily, "General Lin, have you seen enough?" Lin Chen shook his head honestly. Mu Guiying was speechless for a while, and began to complain that she should not have agreed to the bet. Somewhere in the wilderness, a convoy of merchants is being besieged by a group of White Lotus sect thieves. There are about 1,000 people in this convoy, but there are countless thieves from the White Lotus sect. These skinny men, dressed in tatters and without any sharp weapons in their hands, looked at the convoy with green eyes. These low-level followers of the White Lotus sect have been having a hard time lately. The Imperial Army came to suppress them. They received orders from the altar master and began to gather in Xianping. This small town of Xianping actually gathered over 400,000 people from the White Lotus sect. Here, in addition to hundreds of thousands of White Lotus sect soldiers, there are also the families of these soldiers, as well as White Lotus sect believers who are coming one after another. Nature. Shanpyeong was originally a place seriously affected by floods, and the big houses had long been looted. Therefore, many White Lotus believers had no choice but to learn to be mountain kings and began to rob merchants. Because Xianping is close to Sao Canal, now the White Lotus sect controls Xianping and cuts off the supply of caoutchouc. Therefore, these merchants who relied on water transport to transport goods to the capital had to stop near Xianping, then go from Waco to Akakang, and finally to the capital. Right now, this caravan is a fat sheep being targeted by the followers of the White Lotus sect. The leader of this group of White Lotus believers was originally a rogue in the villages and towns, but because of his courage, he was elected as the altar leader. He had been eyeing this caravan for a long time, but unfortunately there were thousands of people in the caravan, so it was difficult to take action. So he found a fellow countryman who served as a captain in the White Lotus army. Just look at this man with a ruddy face and armor, holding a long knife in his hand and watching the situation ahead. "Brother Niu, do you think your people have been killed?" The altar leader looked at his followers who suffered heavy casualties and could not help but feel distressed. On the other hand, his fellow village captain and his thousands of soldiers were still waiting for the resistance of these caravans to weaken. "Are you teaching me how to do something?" The captain of the White Lotus school, who was called Big Brother Niu, spat out the grass roots in his mouth and stared at Tong Ling. Hearing this, the leader of the White Lotus sect stopped talking, but in his heart he cursed the other party bloody. Then the believers under his command were regarded as abandoned, and in the end the other party actually wanted 70% of the caravan's goods. Only, the altar leader, who was too angry and dared not speak out, could only aggrievedly ask his subordinates to arrange for someone to attack again. Yu Bukchun looked at these White Lotus sect mobs that were rushing towards them crazily, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He felt that he was at odds with the White Lotus sect. Originally, Yu Buchan's plan to ward off evil swords failed, so he planned to lead the Washan disciples back to Washan to participate in the Five Mountains Alliance in the autumn. But don't want to. As soon as they arrived at Xianping, they learned that the White Lotus sect thieves had blocked water transportation. In this way, Yu Bukchun planned to take a detour and leave Gyeonggi. Who would have thought that on this road, they would encounter the Shui family caravan that had just come from the south of the Yangtze River. During the reign of Emperor Li in Tang Dynasty, the Shui family was an imperial merchant and was granted the title of Zui Sharon. They were also responsible for royal tributes in Zhongnan and other places. This left many merchants who wanted to send tributes to the palace to rely on the Shui family to survive. The Shui family was extremely prosperous when the late emperor was there. Naturally, Yu Bukchun had heard of the famous Shui family in the south of the Yangtze River, so at the other party's warm invitation, he accompanied the caravan south and avoided the pain of long journeys. But, ever since the first generation head of the Shui family died of illness, I don't know how he got it, and he was also deprived of the right to control tributes. Only the false name of Zui Sharon is left. But even so, the Shui family in Zhongnan and other places could rely on the imperial business name to buy low and sell high, and became extremely wealthy. But now, the Shui family has lost its glory. The head of the Shui family of the previous generation died of illness early, leaving behind a son and a daughter. Nowadays, Aunt Shui takes care of all the affairs of the Shui family. Shui Biao looked at Yu Bukchun, who was leading the Shui family's servants to resist the White Lotus cult thieves, with a look of gratitude on his face. If it weren't for the presence of Master Yu, I would have been in danger. Yu Bukchun. He seemed to have heard this somewhere before. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.